And welcome back to the I Am Not a GM Speed Chess Championship brought to you by Chess.com. We are here with a highly anticipated matchup between International Masters Greg Shahade and International Master John Bartholomew. Greg, we'll start with you. Just tell us your thoughts on the Scandinavian defense.
Honestly, it's a sad day. It's a sad day for me. I've had a lot of issues. Like, I hate to play against the Scandinavian. It's like terrible opening. It's really boring. But still, the fact that after today, I'm going to beat it so badly that nobody will ever play it again, that's a little sad to just see an opening just erased from chess. I don't know if this ever happened before. So it's a bittersweet day.
Well, John, over to you. I mean, anything to say about your beloved Scandi?
Well, I mean, if Greg is able to erase the Scandi from the face of the chess map, then he deserves to have the opening named after him, or at least the refutation, because that would be a historic achievement. So the thing about the Scandi, it's bigger than me. I want to say that I'm part of a community. This is hashtag Team Scandi. Shout out to all you Team Scandi people in the chat, all my friends and family. Thank you guys very much, supporters. So even if I happen to fall, which I won't, fall in the field, the Scandi lives on. It's bigger than just me.
Well, can we get some sort of wager on the line here? If Greg is able to defeat your Scandi, will you make a chessable course with like a refutation to the Scandi?
I already have a chessable course on the Scandi with possibly another one in the works.
A refutation to the Scandi. I didn't say on the Scandi. I don't want a positive.
He's distorting your words already.
Yeah.
No, but to be clear, I have a lot of material on the Scandi out there already, and that's absolutely off the table. Because the thing is, again, the Scandinavian, it's more of a lifestyle rather than a concrete evaluation of an opening. You know, if you play the Scandi, you just know, and you're not so worried about specific refutations that people always tend to purport to have, which I have yet to see, to be honest.
Well,
so that's a no.
Those are some absolutely fighting words. Last question on the Scandi, but I have to ask this. Greg.
Yeah.
Is my memory completely distorted here? Am I suffering from amnesia, or did you seem to play the Scandi against Carissa? Was that sort of a gatekeeper kind of thing where you're trying to lure John into thinking that you respect the Scandi and play it more?
I explained that after the match. I only played the Scandinavian in the bullet games.
That's not true, actually.
Well, you know, whatever.
He played it in the 5+1 portion.
I don't know. You know, mouse slip. It was a mouse slip. I was trying to deceive pawn.
A mouse slip. That's in the mouse slip like that many times.
In the bullet stage, I played it intentionally because bullet chess is trash. So why not play a trash opening over and over? So I promise there will be no Scandi from me in the 5-minute and the 3-minute. It's not going to happen. Zero. If it happens, I will forfeit the match. I will not be playing the Scandi.
2 words, guys. That's Stockholm syndrome right there.
Oh, I like the little Scandinavian reference there. Look at JB. He came ready to play today.
He came ready with a stat line.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say to you two. You guys are fighting. Well, Greg, I need to ask you something. You've been a bit salty, it seems like, about the betting line that's been in place for this match. So what do you want to tell people? You know, should they bet on you? I mean, not that you should be advocating for betting, but
I mean, of course, everyone should go to the bank right now. Like right now, if you're in a place where the bank is still open, withdraw everything. Everything you got, put it online. All these websites in Europe, they have the betting line like +300. You'll never have to work again. I think the line got driven up because this Team Scandi hashtag. There's so many Team Scandi like diehards. They don't really understand how weak the opening is, and they just kind of like blindly bet on it.
That's what they told investors in 1929. Before Black Tuesday.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to bet on a penny stock, go ahead, guys, but only bet what you can afford to lose.
Well, John, I had sort of, I don't want to say a serious question because I don't think any of my questions are serious, but you have a very distinct style. You're a positional master. Do you, before a match like this, do you consciously rethink what style of play you're going to play in, or do you just kind of decide to play your game? Is your preparation more opening related, or is it more style related? And I guess I have the same question for Greg.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely more style related. I try to adapt a little bit to who I'm facing, but I do have my own way of approaching things, and I feel tweaking around the edges is where I'm strong. So yeah, it's mostly psychological and style related, trying to anticipate how the match will flow and, if necessary, making adjustments.
Greg, any thoughts on this?
I want to tell you how I studied for this match. I created a database on ChessBase. All it is, John Bartholomew losses. That's it. So all day I was just looking at him lose. In my mind, he never even draws a game. He just loses every single game.
So there were none of our games in there then, is what you're saying.
Oh my goodness. This is great.
What's the head-to-head
I'm
record?
going to be adding to the database tonight. It's going to
better
get
hope
much
so.
bigger, much bigger.
You better hope so.
Well, John, fill us in. What's the head-to-head like?
Well,
Oh, can I say something about the head-to-head?
go for it.
John Bartholomew, you know, the guy has a lot of accomplishments. I admit he's a decent player.
Whoa, was that a compliment? Did I just hear what I thought I heard?
A lot of accomplishments, right? A lot to brag about. Everyone, go to his Chess.com profile page right now. What do you see in the front page as his biggest achievement of his career? A casual Blitz game against me that was recorded at the Mechanics Institute where he just happened to beat me. He played that game. He was like, this game was so amazing. I beat Greg Shahade. I need to make this the one thing that people see when they come to my...
The only reason that's the video there is the very first video on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
So just to
The
clarify.
origin of, hey guys, this
But-
is John.
To answer your question about the head-to-head, I think we played, one official match? Well, it was like a dual commentary match against each other. It was a few years ago.
Long time ago. Come on.
Right. So it doesn't count for your data.
We did play in a tournament once.
Yeah, we did play in a tournament.
I was black. He was begging me for a draw. I said no, and then we drew. But he begged me first.
Do we need to play this match? I think we could just convert the match into the banter, but
Yeah.
alas, we have a match to play.
Yeah, I think at this point, everybody is begging for the games to get underway. We'll let you both get settled, take a breather, and get ready to play some great chess. So thank you to both for this pre-match interview, and we look forward to seeing some great chess ahead.
Best of
Thanks,
luck.
guys. Yeah, shout out to the Twitch chat and YouTube viewers as well.
And as we get this match underway, we should remind everybody of what they are playing for. It is an invitation to the finale because Alina Kashinskaya has already earned her spot in the finals. Danya, John, Greg, both of them are friends of ours. Who you got and why?
Well, I remember distinctly at the very start of the SCC, I predicted Greg to win the whole thing. I really thought that he was a dark horse. Not many people are familiar with how much of a legend this guy is, and his reign of terror over US chess when he was a junior. John, on the other hand, old, reliable. He has played excellently. I'm going to have to go with John, but by a very, very slight margin, because I think that Greg is going to positively impress. I think he's come prepared. And unlike Lawrence, I think Greg might just be able to back up some of those fighting words.
Wow. Okay. Well, JB, as we've seen on his graphic, he's so highly rated in both Blitz and Bullet. Nearly 2,700 Blitz, nearly 2,600 Bullet. And Greg is not too shabby either. His Blitz skills are renowned. He has many videos of himself playing Blitz. And I guess he reminded us of the one that JB has in his YouTube library. But Greg is nearly 2,600 Blitz, and his bullet rating is a little bit low. But don't be fooled by that. There is an increment. And just a reminder for everybody that there is going to be 75 minutes of a 5+1 second increment, followed by a large period of time. I don't even remember what it is, 45 minutes, right? Is that right? Of 3+1?
Yep, I think that's about right.
I'm doing this all from memory. The graphic will go up in a second.
Yep.
And then there's the 25 minutes of 1+1. That's 1 minute with 1 second increment. So the matchup should be starting any second. I'm not even following the players. So
yeah, I need to follow them too.
Yeah, I don't even. It's been a minute since we've had a match, but we're ready. So let's get this show on the road.
Yeah.
He's Fins with a lot of stuff in it.
Fins, it's Fins 0905.
Okay, too many numbers in there.
That's such a John thing. Oh, how about IM Fins or Fins birthday? No, Fins 09. Hey guys, Fins, I'm Fins 0905. Let's get started. And they are underway. John with the white pieces in the first game. And we have a Grunfeld on the board.
We do. You struggled a little bit on the Grunfeld because you wanted to say Scandinavian. I could tell. We're not getting a Scandinavian, maybe ever. And I want to see a Scandi, but who knows if John will actually put on his big boy pants and play one. But anyway, we have a Grunfeld here, and John thinks for a strangely large amount of time before playing Bishop G5, a line that I know very well from the white side. And these lines can be very dangerous for black if you don't know what you're doing. But on the flip side, they can be dangerous for white because after you steal this pawn on C4, Danya, sometimes you don't get it back so easily.
No, and John getting it back easily. I don't think John's a big fan of those positions where black ties himself to the pawn of bishop e6. So here, queen a4 takes c4. The obvious drawback of that, the queen develops itself early, and it could be subject to various attacks like bishop a6, or even after bishop b7. John's got to be a little bit careful about the position of that queen.
Right, and that's why John started with knight to f3, because if we started with a pawn move, then bishop a6 comes, and there's bishop a6. The bishop on f1 would be captured, and then white would lose the right to castle. But still, it's not going to be so easy to castle if you just think about it. The queen is moved away from the attack, but either you play an e-pawn move, in which case I take you on f1, you lose your right immediately once you recapture, or you play g3, bishop g2, and then the e2 pawn is feeling a little bit vulnerable in such a scenario.
And that bishop on h4 are going to be awkward as well. So John deciding on e3, I wonder what he's going to recapture with. He recaptures with the king. So the king is relatively safe given the absence of pieces in the center, but a little bit of an awkward situation. Black could later on play c5. Whenever there's a Grunfeld, you can't sleep on your king safety.
That's true. And, he goes king e2. That way he can move his rook away from the corner, maybe rook h to d1, and then bring his king back to f1. So the rook gets out of the way, the king slides back, white's king is safe. And white is a bit ahead in development in terms of control over the board. Look at this nice central pawn structure with c3, d4, e3. Even if black plays c5, you're not actually attacking anything because the foundation of the position, the d4 pawn, is so well protected. So that way white can play rook h to d1 and then move that king away. So knight c6 played by Greg. He's going for the light squares, Danya, which I think is a smart approach because there is a king on e2. So even if there's not going to be a checkmate or any sort of big attack, knight a5 comes, and it's not going to be easy for white to ever get this move c4, as it's not actually that simple to keep that square protected.
Exactly. And the opening of the c file is squarely in black's favor. So Greg can play rook a8. Well, first of all, the e7 pawn is saying he's got to deal with that. But at some point, if the c file opens, as you pointed out, Robert, it might not be checkmate, but that pressure on the queen side can get incredibly unpleasant in the Grunfeld. But here he's got to figure out how he defends the pawn. Does he play e6? Does he play rook f8? Or does he play something like c5, which is sometimes possible in an opening as dynamic as the Grunfeld? He decides to go for e6. And my guess is his follow-up is going to be rook c8, maybe even bishop f8, although I don't like that move as much. But he's trying to orient himself on c5.
And I'm wondering for John if this is a moment to play a move like knight to e5, because if black were to take on e5, yes, white gets the double pawns, but you have control of all these very important dark squares on the king side. So the bishop on g7 is essential to Greg's position right now. And you might be right that he may reroute the bishop to f8 at some point, but queen d5 is a nice move. It keeps the rook on a1 tied down for the time being, because the a2 pawn can and will be captured if you allow me to, but also just a simple queen c4 check, trading queens, maybe a knight c4, keeping the stranglehold on the position. And also c5 is now much more possible because the queen protects the square.
Yep, and John untying himself from that a pawn. Queen c4 check even immediately is very much possible. That endgame is not going to be worse for black. But I think Greg can go for more here. I think rook fc8 is something to consider. I still like the concept of preparing c5, adding some spice to that queenside pressure, and that's what he does. And I got to make sure I'm muted on Greg's screen. And of course, I'm joking. Greg is a very, very strong player. And I don't know what you think about this, Rob, but some people might not be familiar with his string of tournament successes. But there was a point at which Greg, his playing strength was equivalent to that of a grandmaster. And while your rust might speak its word and make its presence felt, class doesn't fully go away even after many years of tournament sort of dormancy.
Well, you actually hinted, not even hinted, you stated it in the pre-match interview. These players have totally different styles. John, he's the type of person who's just like inching his way forward, seizing a small advantage and growing that one into a full point. Greg is a tactical player. He loves just like fighting chess, just, really going toe-to-toe with anybody. And you're right that Greg, he doesn't play seriously anymore. He's mostly a blitz player these days. He doesn't compete in classical time controls, but a very talented player for sure. And right now with the black side of this, he's up a minute on the clock. We like his position from a strategic point of view, and we also like his decision to play rook after c8 because he keeps the position closed for now. He can and will play c5. He's prepared that option, but now there's going to be a target on the c3 square. So if you ever take me on c5, now I don't have to isolate my own pawns, because before the rook got there, then I would trade queens and have isolated pawns of my own. Now, because the rook is on c8, I can just take back on c5 with the queen and then with the rook as is needed. And there's a weakness on the c3 square.
Right. And John quite a bit lower on time as well. Greg going for queen c4 check. Very measured, sort of calm play here by Greg. He's not, not doing anything drastic. I'm not sure that is the best he can do. One of his ideas is after queen takes queen, knight takes queen. If you try to dislodge the knight with knight d2, there's this move knight b2 followed by knight d3, picking off an exchange. So we can see the positive byproducts of having pieces that are this active. It's a typical Grunfeld thing to have all of these dynamic little tactical ideas. So John's got to decide whether he's even taking the queen or going king g1 and keeping the tension.
Yeah, well, I had enough time to show that fully because John hasn't moved yet. And this has not been good time management, if you ask me, on John's part. But kudos to Greg because he made it clear he's prepared for this match. He was, telling jokes, but I only looked at John's losses. He's taking this match seriously. And King G1 finally played after a 40-second think. And he's been a minute and 13 seconds on the move before that. So in the last couple moves, Greg has obtained a huge advantage on the clock. And right now, Donna, you do not want to take on B4 because after Queen B4, C B4, that rook on C1 now has a clear purpose. So you would much rather white capture you on that score. So Bishop F8 feels like a good move just to attack the
or C5, and that's what he does.
C5, there it is. Some scenarios you want to keep this pawn C7 just to avoid any sort of trades, but this is definitely a moment where it is the right time to play C5, and here it takes.
Well, now he's got really a devastated queenside pawn structure. Notice what Greg's also doing, constantly forcing John to make decisions. It's not only about the objective strength of his moves. He's forcing John to be the one. Do I trade queens here? Do I trade queens in this manner? Do I trade queens in that manner? All of those decisions take away a lot of time, as they have. But I really like this move, queen f4, Robert. It's a very practical chance. You don't go into a miserable endgame. Instead, you orient yourself on some sort of counterplay connected with rook d7. That's exactly what you mentioned. The move c5, it opened the d file, it ruined white's pawn structure, but it also gives white this source of counterplay.
Yeah, I actually was waiting for you to say that. I had h6 and g5 lined up for black with highlights, but you mentioned rook d7. So black was not in time to coordinate this h6, g5 with a fork. And that's why Greg plays queen f5. And his point is, if you take, I'll take with the g pawn. And you have double pawns, but you're capturing towards the center. And in the meantime, the c3 pawn, right? Danya, that's the weakest square on the board.
It is. I think John's going to go rook d7 here. He's going to try to go for activity, but I don't fully buy it. The problem is, if black eliminates that pawn on c3, John trying to cling to his pawn.
Rook c4, though.
Oh, that's
you can't even move the knight. Watch out.
That is a knife.
The knight would love to go to b5 and into the black position, but the bishop on h4 is hanging. Bishop e7. The idea, I guess, is some kind of bishop b4, but I'm not believing that.
Knight c4 in that position, and then a5. Unfortunately, none of white's positions stick. It's like that. I bought this little sticky device for my sponge, and I kept sticking it to the wall of the sink, and it kept sliding down. That's like white's pieces here, easily dislodged.
Okay, I did not know where you were going with that. At first, I thought you were going to make a Flubber reference and something about Robin Williams, but then you went with the adhesive on your sponge. So kudos to you for going out.
I was going to make a Saddlemen reference, and then I realized nobody cares about Saddlemen.
Whoa! You do not insult the band Saddlemen. That is uncalled for. That is just ridiculous. You know, you're on time.
You gotta fire some early shots, John.
Because
you know how they fight duels.
Oh my gosh!
Gotta fire the ceremonial first shot.
That was bad. I'm upset with you now. But anyway, the c3 pawn now well defended by white, but white is down a pawn. Greg's spending some serious time here. He's down under a minute on the clock. He's still ahead by about 15 seconds at this point, but making progress, not the easiest thing in the world. I would play a6 at some point to kick the knight out of b5, but then you're worried, is bishop takes a5 happening, ruining my pawn structure on there's a6. I actually think that's a good move because you're not so worried about bishop takes a5 because that gets rid of an important defender on the c3 pawn.
Right. And I think it should be noted, time scrambles, I would imagine, favor John, just because he's a little bit less rusty. And that's one thing that's hard to emulate when you're preparing, is that ability to play time scrambles. The problem here after b5, Greg's position is so easy to play. White's position is crumbling in 10 different parts of the board. There's just John trying to cling on to his position, but even just bishop takes d4 here and anything virtually, it's hard to go wrong.
Yes, and after bishop d4, you have to e takes because the bishop needs protection, taking this, and rook d8. You actually are scooping up this d pawn.
Yeah, and this is completely lost. I would play rook a1 if I were John, try to survive that endgame 2 pawns down, but it's virtually impossible. John's also got no time.
Yeah, he's going for this exact endgame. You spoke. F4 here is probably a good move for black, just to undouble one of your pawns, but it's not necessary. You can just bring your king up, play b4, b3.
It's not over. I mean, these endgames can be they can look easily winning because you're 2 pawns up, but when you have a rook endgame, it's never entirely clear cut. So Greg's got to chart a course here and go for it.
Yeah, and he actually could have thrown an f4 check with the rook on b2, keeping the king honest, the f2 square. And that's something you want to keep in your mind. But right now, he's under 10 seconds. Okay, now he's 11. John about to flag, though, 2.7 seconds.
Even rook h1 here is possible, exchanging the b pawn. That's what he does. This is definitely winning. John's got to watch his clock, though.
Yep.
He can't beat himself here. He's got to make Greg be the one to win. When you have 7 seconds, anything can happen. Mouse slip, anything.
Yep, and it's not that easy to win this game, actually, because you look at the position, you say, wait, h and f versus just king and rook versus king, rook, h and f pawns is a theoretical draw. You have that in the back of your mind because there's some strong players. But look at this, John building up his clock here. Greg moving back and forth to gain some time himself, finally pushes a pawn. He's going e4. He's going
That's possible. Yeah, he wants to go rook d2, but he's got to be careful. His pawns are very weak. He wants e3.
Yes, he does. And that's why
F4, but he blunders the pawn.
He hangs upset, but he brings king into f3.
Oh, what a move. King f4.
He's take on f4. That was actually really smart.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay,
go. No time on the clock to find such an idea. Rook g3. But how do you keep all your pawns protected?
There it is. Bring that rook back. And now bring your king back to g4.
Yep, and f5. Yeah, yes. This is winning.
f5. Here it is.
Look at Greg.
And rook g6 check now. Force the king back. And then play h5. Okay, he doesn't play h5.
Gaining some time.
So he's just maneuvering around. He doesn't know exactly what to do. But I like putting the rook behind
f4. And rook g8, there's king f3. John surviving with the skin of his teeth. 1.1 seconds, he got to move.
Okay, but this pawn f4 is under
f3.
check.
F3 would have won.
Oh, f3 was winning on the spot.
F3 and then rook g1, rook f1.
Yep.
He's got to watch stalemate.
Wait, no, but rook f4 check. Rook f4 check. It's not winning.
Oh, even rook takes f3 there was stalemate.
Rook just break.
It's a draw now, rookie 3.
Oh, he didn't play rookie 3, but
Rookie
still
3
a draw.
here. Why is he not playing rookie 3?
He got it now.
There we go.
Yep. And
oh my goodness.
H4 checking
G2 simply. Unbelievable save by John.
You know, it was funny. You were talking about F3 check and the rook around, but I was like, in my head, I was trying to make my way through these variations, and I realized that the F3 pawn had gone too far. So once you trade E4 for F2, the F3 pawn falls as well, and the H pawn, that dastardly H pawn, can't win with just that thing. And now it is half-half. Greg, the upper hand, he said that in their classical game, right, John begged for a draw with the white pieces. John just begged for a draw with the white pieces and succeeded in this game too.
And he got it. I mean, Greg, a little too many transformations there. First, he gave up that pass pawn for the H pawn, and I think he spent a little bit too long moving back and forth, not kind of deciding on something, and then he stumbled a little bit, mixing up a couple of different plans. But John at one point went down to 0.01 seconds. Incredible composure to save that position, especially given so many people watching. That's got to be so nerve-wracking experiencing these time scrambles. So really kudos to both players. They handled themselves well. But John, that's a big psychological blow for Greg. He's got to put that behind him, focus, and try to win this next game with white.
And this is prep, by the way, because this is a pawn sacrifice. Bishop takes c3. You take back on c3 with the d pawn. Knight takes e4. But the point is that all of a sudden, white gets 2 bishops against 2 knights in open space. The black king may not find the easiest shelter, but you don't play a line like this. And I'm trying to remember the players. I want to say it's like a Navarra game or something. I'm misremembering at the moment. But bishop takes c3, d c3, knight takes e4. Is just, I grabbed the pawn e5. Knight takes e4. It's just an option to steal a pawn here, Danya.
Yeah, and John going for e5, that's a pretty bold move because, his pieces aren't entirely developed. I think he's got a castle here because if you take on c3 now, that's just not an option. And for Greg, you can just play d3 because that creates an additional possibility of bishop h6. Not technically a threat because knight e8 saves the exchange, but I really don't know who's better here. It's hard to evaluate this position. Very complicated. It might just be kind of equal. But I like Greg's position here. I think he's got a lot of dynamic chances. And
look at the time, Danya. So we see the position where there's this black bishop on d4, which at first glance, it may look good. It's an advanced piece. But at the same time, it's kind of stuck there. If you ever take on e4 with the pawn, I can take back with my pawn, and your bishop's pinned to the queen. So are you going to take on c3? That's the essential question here. You already have given up 1 bishop for a knight. Are you going to go ahead and give up a second one?
Well, as the Russian expression goes, having said A, you have to say B. Wonderful expression. I'm sure everybody will be using this, for the rest of history. Now, one thing that concerns me is combining a move like bishop h6 with a move like bishop f3, pressuring black center. Greg could also play bishop g5 simply. He's constantly got to worry about bishop takes c3, as you mentioned, but even bishop c3 bc, that pawn on e5 then becomes weak. John's got some serious problems to solve here. I don't know what you think about this position, Robert, but I'm starting to get a little nervous about John's prospects.
And that's why he played knight to c7, because it reinforces the pawn on d5, so that won't be hanging. And at the right time, you'll play knight to e6, which protects g7 and attacks his bishop on g5. But look at Greg going after this pawn on d5. So using your idea here, Danya, first pinning the knight on f6, then playing bishop f3. You cannot take on e4 because knight takes e4, and then I'm taking advantage of your pinned knight. So what are you thinking about here?
Well, I was calculating a crazy line. Bishop c3 bc, de, queen e7, and now this positional sack, rook to d7.
I knew where you're going with it. I had you.
You know me too well, Mr. Hess.
And there's the point is that the g7 pawn is pinned, so you have to make a move like g6 just to stop checkmate, and then I can take on e5 and go queen g5, things like this to bring my queen in for a checkmate. I love that kind of sacrifice. I hope we see something like it.
But queen d6. Queen d6. Now knight e2. I think knight e2 is something to consider because bishop takes b2. There's rook a b1. You can't go back to d4. No parking permitted because of that queen on d6. White's rook is going to swoop in with rook takes b7, and black's position is starting to crumble seriously there. So I would consider knight e2 here.
And because of the, I don't want to call it an attack per se, but the pressure that white has on the king side, that's why it's actually not in black's favor to totally open the other side of the board as well. Greg plays knight e2, also d4 in many of these variations, right? If you go bishop b6, I go d4, saying your pawn is pinned, and I am threatening to just go d takes e5 and open everything up. So bishop b6 played.
even e takes d5 first, because d4 there might be knight takes c4, but if you take on d5 first, at the end of the day, you just might have a huge positional advantage. He does play d4 though. I feel like knight e4 is forced, otherwise black's going to lose everything.
But knight e4, bishop e4, de4, de5. Where's your queen going to? G6?
Yeah, I guess queen. No, but then knight f4. Oh,
yeah, that was what I was concerned
dastardly
about.
sequence. And if queen e6, there's bishop f6.
Yep.
Knight e8. Man,
Knight and knight f4,
and then bishop e7. Oh, that's just cruel.
Hey, Danya, we're on the same page today, man.
We really are. We're clinging. I mean, maybe we should call a truce.
I think we should.
It sounds like we're, it's an atmosphere of an agreeable atmosphere in the air right now. Don't ruin it, Mr. Hess.
Well, I mean, I think John may want us to stop because his position for the second game in a
Far
row.
from agreeable, yeah.
Yeah, it's looking like there's some trouble here because queen e6 played and
How
rook
about
d6 or bishop f6.
Queen f5. I'm trying to find a knockout blow.
Bishop
there. Okay.
f6 is just, I mean, the most logical, the easiest move to play. And knight e8, as we said, knight f4 comes in, kicking the queen away with bishop e7 stuff, trapping the rook. So what do you even do here as black?
Well, you
G6?
can't play g6. I feel like that's just harakiri. I mean, if you play g6,
I would play queen h4 and then even knight g3 winning the e4 pawn. Something like that.
Now knight f4, queen f5, bishop e7, and you can't even.
Okay, whoa! What?
I mean, now it takes in king h8.
No, take on f6.
Oh my God, that's just and maybe rook d6 there.
No, but then knight
h5. He just
what was
missed
that?
it. He just forgot about knight takes f6. I think he fell under the same illusion I did. Now black is better. He can't take on e4.
What in the world?
Oh my goodness!
Happened?
What in the world?
We're going to bring up the analysis board really quickly because Greg just botched that advantage, and now all of a sudden
in the world,
John is the one with the superior position because knight f4 hits this queen with the same tempo, but there's no capture of this knight on f4. So the queen has to move, and no matter where it moves, bishop e7 is the follow-up, winning this rook on f8. So it was just a material advantage for Greg. Instead, he chooses knight d4, and as we see in the game, after all these trades, everything settles here. It's just an advantage for John. Go to the live position, Danya, and look at this.
Just rook e4. I would play rook e4, takes in a queen c7 at the end. John might have made a counter blunder there.
A counter blunder. I like that. A new expression.
I don't like that position at all. Queen c7. Practically speaking, white starts to vacuum up some of black's queenside pawns. And John, I don't know. He wants rook e2. He wants counterplay, but these positions can absolutely go either way. My guess is it's probably in the realm of equality.
I like white's position. I'm with you. Just play some kind of b4, take the c pawn.
Yeah.
It feels like the advantage on the queen side is a4 is even better.
Because and you got to be careful. White's going to run that pawn up to a6. I feel like black's going to activate counterplay ASAP by making a whole, h5, and then bring the other rook to e2. You have to start counterplay against white's king, or these pawns are going to run up super fast.
The problem with doing that, though, is I always have queen takes c6, which protects the g2 pawn.
True.
And because white's pawns are away from the black king, I'm happy to see everything trade off on g2 and then win with my outside pass pawn. So that's the black king would have to be over near the queen side in order to make that capture on g2 happen. And actually, h4 is risky. And the reason why is maybe the white queen can go over and scoop up that h pawn, in which case black's going to regret that pawn push.
Yeah, I mean, maybe John is trying to actually checkmate white by putting both rooks on the first rank. And that's definitely a scary idea because if he accomplishes that, white might not have checks, but Greg doing exactly as you prescribed, Robert, going after that pawn. If he takes that pawn, he knows his king's going to be very safe. John's got to use this opportunity to switch to the queen side, and that is what he does. Rook c2, trying to capture that pawn on c3. White definitely in the driver's seat here. Maybe takes a7 and then queen d4.
Okay. So he could have started with queen takes a7. So I actually think queen e7 was a bad move because the rook was on f2 before. So queen takes a7 to start with would have hit that rook, and then you could have brought your queen back to d4 as is needed. And you gave up a very important queenside pawn. So he will play a5, continue on the side of the board. But what I'm envisioning, Danya, is attacking one of the pawns and essentially giving up my c pawn for one of your queenside pawns, and then my rooks will swallow the next one. So I actually don't know if white has any real chances to win this game anymore, barring a big blunder.
The time situation a little bit concerning for John. These positions always hard to play with no time because it's so easy to blunder a rook, blunder a fork, allow a pawn through, but he does exactly that, pegging himself to that pawn. Now queen b6 or queen c4. Ooh, but he might have, okay, rook b2, I guess. Oh,
What did you get
close.
scared of there? That you
I
couldn't
thought
keep-
rook a3, queen takes c6, but I forgot it can just play rook b2.
Yes, you need
Queen
to keep an eye
c3,
on
rook b1. It's close. Queen c3, he has only one move.
Yep, rook b1, and then
But-
the problem is the queen can't attack the rook anymore and protect the pawn on b4 at the same time. Are we going to see a draw by repetition with
We
queen
might.
d4?
I think he was going to grab on h4, actually.
But if he takes on h4, there's just rook to b8.
That's
Immediately
true.
You're
No,
losing the b8.
it's not even worth it, because if white loses both of the queenside pawns, then he's got to be very careful not to lose.
Right. And if you play a5, rook b8, a6, that's something to consider, but I don't really believe in that.
I don't
But
buy it either.
It is an option. You could be playing to lose, though. That's the big problem.
Yeah, I mean, the moment that black stops the promotion square, white is the one who has to focus on making a draw. So I feel like Greg's going to take 10 more seconds and accept the inevitable.
Yeah, we've seen. Yep, here it is. We've seen this repetition, and John should be thrilled that he has
Dodging
won F2
bullets. Yeah, incredible.
1-1 thus far. And Greg Shahade, let me ask you something. Psychologically, Danya, Greg's had the advantage in both games, but he's failed to convert. So who does this favor after 2 games?
It absolutely favors John. Now, one could say, well, I mean, Greg is the one with the upper hand, so maybe he's convinced now that he can outplay John consistently. But these players know that, they're both capable of beating the other. They're not under any illusions about the difference in playing strength. They're pretty evenly matched.
Yep.
But when this happens time and time again, it's just so frustrating. It's debilitating. And, it's like you keep rolling the stone up the hill and then it keeps tumbling back down, like the story of Sisyphus. It's hard to continue to put the same effort when every time you feel like you're just about to win the game and then the rock rolls back down the hill. So I think John has the psychological upper hand, but Greg, very experienced player. He's been through so much. I feel like that's exactly where experience can come into play and calm him down.
Okay. And I think that's a fair assessment. We don't know for certain in either direction. But here we see that in this particular position, black can consider playing g6 to g5, a sort of kingside expansion that challenges the bishop, then just, says, I'm going to get adventurous over here. Instead, Greg is playing on the queen side. But Danya, when is g5 happening for black? Because I feel like it's bound to happen.
It's happening on January 6, 2021.
I appreciate the specific day.
on 5:34 Eastern time. No, I think, it's annoying because bishop f6 constantly has to be reckoned with. The problem with g5, though, is it does create slight, discomfort on the queen side. But here we see a queen trade and sort of a typical structure where black is the double pawns, but the A file is now plugged. I like John's position. I think he's definitely slightly better here.
Yeah, black would love to play b6 to b4 in one move, but unfortunately going through b5 just loses the pawn because the bishop on e2 will capture it. And that is sort of the compensation. There's g5 at last, but that's the compensation that black tries to get, is some activity on the queen side. But as you said, the a file is completely plugged up. The rook on 8 not doing anything. The pawn on a3 protected very nicely by this pawn on b2. And how do you attack this pawn on b2? You would have to somehow move your knight away from f6 and get e5. Punch that move through. Doesn't seem very likely.
Yeah, this is also exactly, and we've talked about this before, this is exactly the kind of position John likes, no risk. And he's incredibly good at putting pressure. And I can speak from experience. I played so much Blitz with him in person and online. And he is incredibly good at putting pressure in seemingly equal positions. He just knows how to twist the knife in a little bit. So Greg's got to be super precise here. Trades off a pair of knights, not a bad idea. Maybe doubling on the C file should be considered. Rook C3. Yep.
And black can't do the same, unfortunately, because the c7 square is under white's control. The bishop on g3 is super strong here. And if you move your knight away from c6 to trade rooks, then actually white may play bishop to c7, right? So like knight a5, bishop c7. It might not work just yet, but there's one of those moves you keep in the back of your mind. It's like, wait a second, that could be a problem for me with the b6 pawn. But in this particular position, black has this like intermediate move knight to c4 to close off the c file, and things get messy.
Yeah, this is the first time really so far that John has been in the driver's seat. And let's see how Greg handles a slightly worse position. I think he's leading the bishop back to d7, safeguarding that rook on c8 in preparation for potential knight a5, or just stopping moves like knight e5 or bishop b5.
And the problem, though, is even if you play knight a5 now, the rook can land on c7.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
You're sort of stuck, at least for now. And white can consider bishop b5 at some moment, just saying, hey, now your knight really can't move very easily. But John pushes forward on the king side.
Twisting that knife.
Mm-hmm. You play on both sides. So for black, do you play g4? Do you take on h4? I would not take on h4.
Yeah, but g4, I think he's worried about. Is he worried about knight e5? Because those holes on the king side and in the center start being a little bit concerning. Yep. And John with a decision. Does he play knight e1 or does he play knight e5? Or knight h2, also possible, I guess. One
of the benefits of playing knight e5 is if black captures on e5, I'm just going to show that really quickly, and we can see a lot of trades, the white king will actually go up to d4. It's a long ways away, so like, how do you even think about that? But in endgames, you want to see where your king can infiltrate from, and clearing that square for your king is actually quite valuable in certain situations.
You're absolutely right. You've opened my eyes up to this, Robert, to a degree. Forecasting what happens if all the pieces are traded and we have a pawn endgame or we have a bishop endgame, that might seem insignificant, but trades happen faster than anyone might realize, especially with such a wide open C file. I feel like John did just that and decided on knight e5. I think that's a very good practical decision.
Yeah, and the bishop on g7 with a pawn e5 will be quite useless. And if you ever try to reroute with a bishop f8, e6 type of maneuver, then white will play b4 and just say, your bishop, even if it changes diagonals, there's nowhere for it to work with. So now John is thinking, does he take on e5 with the bishop, which clears the g3 square for the king? So that's really what this is coming down to, this decision. Do I just take with the pawn and leave you with a bad bishop, but leave my bishop also a bit questionable? Or do I take with the bishop, allowing more trade, he does it, and say king h2, king g3, walk right into the king side and hit the g4 pawn?
Yeah, crunching those leaves, just that king on g3, h5, king f4, such a nasty idea. And I'm not sure John was thinking about what to recapture with. I think he was trying to remember the store hours of his neighborhood Starbucks, because I haven't seen him as intensely sipping on that coffee as he did during the first match, which was much earlier in the day. So I might finish my coffee long before John finishes his, which is entirely unacceptable.
And this was a big decision, by the way, by Greg to trade everything off on the C file here. And now h5, exactly what you called for. But now one thing to consider is king g7, f6, and taking back on f6 with the king so that the black king can come to g5. One huge downside of putting your pawn on h5 is that actually that pawn h5 is in a light square where black can attack it. But just take on f6, took back with the pawn, he had to, and now the king's coming right to g3 into f4. This is clearly much better for white.
This might just be completely winning because, but king g3, king f7, king f4, king f6. And then the question is, can you use the technique of Zugzwang to force black's bishop off of a key diagonal? Because if not, it is kind of a fortress. We know a couple of amateurs who don't believe in fortresses, some guy named Magnus, but this might just survive. I'm not sure. I don't see a way to induce Zugzwang just yet, but I think such a way does exist.
And we've seen some great, was it Leela chess, right? With that amazing bishop endgame against Stockfish, right? That was the one that was played a couple months ago. And in that one, a pawn was sacrificed to clear squares for the king. And here you see this king on f6, king on f4 stare down. The white king cannot infiltrate because of this king on f6. So John will maneuver his bishop. You were calling for this. Just maneuver around, maybe have a position where black just can't move, right? You like any move, you're in Zugzwang and that
king e5. King e5.
Oh gosh, you take
that's a typical idea in these positions, but oh my goodness, Robert, I see something crazy. King e5.
I know what you're gonna say. Yep.
f4.
Yep.
He takes f4, g3. And if you take on g3, I go king takes e8, and I might promote.
Well, yeah, exactly. The pawn, D pawn is going through. So that's a nice find by you there. And king e5 play. Oh, here's f4. Immediately.
g3 by John. What a move. Stopping everything.
So that was well spotted by you and well spotted by John.
But John, I'm so impressed with John. Not only did he spot that combination, instantly playing g3. Such a practical move. No need to calculate the ramifications of that. Just completely winning. No possibility for creating a passer.
The king on e5 is way too strong because all you need to do now is move your bishop back to anywhere, say a4 to b3, and then you win the d5 pawn. There's no way for black to even come remotely close to protecting it. And king takes e8, king takes e6. White's king is so much more active. In the end game, the king becomes an attacking piece. You saw John do just that. He traded bishops in the e5 square, brought his king into h2, to g3, to f4, finally to e5. And this king is used as a weapon and is going to win John this game.
Yeah, and he's just going to vacuum up all of the rest of the pawns, as you pointed out. I think both players deserve a lot of credit here. This might have been more obvious than I realized, but still, to find this counter resource and then to find G3 displays, tenacity from both players here. And this is going to be another big blow for Greg, who could have been up plausibly 2 points at this juncture in the match. So how devastating is this, Robert, in your opinion? And will he be able to quickly regain his composure and strike back?
No,
assuming John wins, which is quite likely.
It's so painful because Greg had two huge advantages, and John was able to survive both those. And the one time when his position was uncomfortable, John converts into the full point. And I know we're only into game 3 of the match, and I'm not trying to prognosticate and say that, oh, of course, John's going to win now because of what's happening in game 3, but it just feels terrible when you're unable to win games that you have an advantage in, and your opponent, that one time where you probably felt that it wasn't that bad for me, it quickly became that bad when you overlooked the tactic. And so just G4 now is good. And you can also play for G5, King G4, sacrifice your H pawn, use a decoy, and then bring your king right over to the king side.
B4 here induces Zugzwang, which is what he does. John with a very, very practical. He could have gone for a pawn race and won that as well, but leaving nothing up to chance, and G5 wins on the spot. G6 or this.
Yeah.
And the game is over, red rover.
And this is actually a great example, a picturesque example of why having pawns on both sides of the board is important. And we'll pull that up in the analysis board really quickly. Just to remind everybody who may not be so familiar that in that end game there, without the queenside pawns, just these H pawns would be a draw because black would just put the king in the corner and stop them. But because they're queenside pawns on the board, the white king will say, I don't care about those H pawns. They're double, they're isolated. Go have them. I'm going to bring my king over to the queenside, gobble up B6, B5, and win the game easily on the queen side. So without further ado, we have game 4. We have a repeat of game 2 with this 2 knights in the Caro-Kann that I grew up playing from the white side. So Danya, I have kind of a bias, a slight bias for white's position. I like having the 2 bishops, but what do you make of this opening choice by Team Scandi playing?
It's a very John-like opening. And by the way, before I launch into this, a big shout out to Chess.com, Grandmasters Hansen and Hamilton for the big raid. We welcome everybody who come from their channel. So thanks again. And what do I make of this structure? I also have a bias for white side here because I personally like these kind of open positions with the 2 bishops. But look at those. Look, I don't even know how to describe them. Those crab claws on C6 and E6. It's like those spikes stopping any potential central expansion. So I feel like John is right at home here, but it's a very hard position to play for black because Greg has a pretty clear plan, right? He wants to play rook E1, bishop F4, rook E5 at some point, maybe orchestrate something on the king side. For black, he oftentimes has to shuffle his pieces back and forth and sort of wait for white to do something. But for John, that's not a style of play that he's bad at. In fact, he's one of the best in the business at precisely that.
Yeah, because this is sort of a Scandinavian, right? In the Scandinavian, you play E4, D5. White gives up the E pawn for the D pawn, and the queen moves back off into the starting square. So this is actually just like a Scandinavian. And your point is well taken that these pincers on B7, C6, F7, E6, it means that light square bishop, that is white's advantage in the position, isn't quite that useful. What's the diagonal you want to work with? Well, actually, the bishop on D3 is on that correct diagonal, hitting H7, but it's not very simple to actually create an attack. So black is doing well to fend off this bishop for now. White can consider playing C4 at the right moment, just pushing the queen back and gaining some space. But anytime you push C4, you lose the defense of the D4 pawn. And even though bishop E5 is played first, C4 can be played. Still, if you push that C pawn, you have to make sure that that pawn on D4 will be well protected because black will try to trade off the dark square bishop on E5 and then go after this newly created potential vulnerability on the D4 square.
Well explained. Man, this game not quite going my way, guys. And it seems like Greg, once again, excellent time consumption. He's only spent 30 seconds in the opening here. John, well over a minute, almost 2 minutes. But this is the situation where Greg has struggled. In the critical moments, he's either tactically blundered or he's let something slip. With a series of inaccuracies, I would consider queen E3 in this position. Also notice knight D7. Yep, knight D7 almost gets that queen trapped, but the queen does have the A5 escape square. Still, G6 is a very committal move, weakening that diagonal. If John could get his bishop to G7, he'd breathe easier. But I don't see an easy way to do that.
Yeah, there is no easy way to do that because you have to first move your knight out of the way, as the bishop is needed to protect that knight, and then move your bishop. It's a long story, but queen e3 is one of these moves where your queen can just slide over to the king side with a queen g3 eventually. And you'd like to play h4, h5, to soften up the g6 square a little bit. Of course, John not making that easy, as now the bishop on e5 will be captured if you leave it there. And so what do? Do you start with bishop c7?
Yeah, that's man, Rob, I think we really need to call that truce.
Yeah, I think we must. And bishop c7 kicks this rook away from the d file and says, wait, your queen no longer has access to a5. So when I attack your queen, the queen will have to run over to the h5 square, the only safe square in the position. Well, g5,
I don't know about
I guess,
this
also.
move, though. Queen a5, and then black does get a chance to play bishop f6, bishop g7.
Yeah, also not a huge fan of this decision.
I feel like Greg really had a chance to basically run that c4, t5 breakthrough through. And now that chance is gone. By the way, after bishop f3, black could even consider trading off a pair of bishops with knight t5. I mean, trading knight for the bishop.
Right.
And then if bishop d5, cd.
I was highlighting that as you were saying it. The point is that you are essentially, by force, winning the bishop. Maybe bishop g5 here is a possibility, but after bishop g5, there's knight g4. Getting out of the way of a pin and opening up a discovered attack on the g5 square. So Greg drops back to c2.
That's... Oh, and knight d5, and okay, a3 is also in the mix here, but John could even just capture on f4, and he's not going to be worse in that position. He does play a3, inducing weaknesses.
But b4 is both a weakness and a sort of strength in a way. If you are not taking white's dark square bishop, and now you aren't because I can just play a move like bishop e5 back or bishop to c7 first or somewhere. I mean, pushing the pawns can allow rook b1, pawn b5, and that bishop on c2, which has lacked a good diagonal, can finally get one.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very double-sided move. And g4 is also in the mix, something that John has to watch out for, although it really doesn't even come close to trapping the queen. Knight d5 is a good move, forcing the queen to decide. Now, queen h4 is possible, bishop h4. The problem with those moves is the queen always has that square on d3. To escape to. So big decision here for John. I feel like this is an important moment in the game.
Yes, I see Teddy Coleman in the chat. Shout out to Teddy, who was a semifinalist in this very event. John can think about b5 now, and from the black side, and that way white can't play b5 himself, and you're sort of closing down on the queen side. The downside of a move like b5 is if white were able to play c4, then everything starts breaking open the position. Of course, c4 not easy to play with this pawn on b4. So vulnerable and needing the c3 pawn's protection. But b5 is certainly a consideration and a thematic one. But I don't feel like John is going to play b5 here. Something about that move feels a little bit risky. His queen on h5, as you pointed out, Danya, doesn't have much breathing room on the king side over here. But queen h4, just there it is.
There it is. Wow.
Queen
just
f3.
As you call it.
I would play queen f3.
Yeah, me too. I would not trade queens just yet. Although you could take and play rook d3, but I feel like that's a bit of a cop-out. I mean, I just don't see a big advantage there, even if that a3 pawn in some distant future falls. And here we see queen f3. John also very low on time. With the queens on the board, it's a harder position to play. Okay, bishop d6. So c4 is possible, by the way. c4, bishop e5, cd, but doesn't look right because of bishop takes c4 at the end.
Right. The queen and the bishop team up well on the d4 square, and that's a problem tactically for white. I was highlighting the b4 square, but I understood after c4, knight before you bishop f6, hitting the queen, hitting the rook on d8. And even if this bishop on c2 looks a little shaky there, it's probably not enough compensation for black just yet. So what about just bishop b3 or something like that, allowing the capture on the e5 square, saying I'm going to take back with my pawn on e5, and so maybe bishop e4 is better than bishop b3, but same purpose. I'm getting
Probably
ready.
Bishop e4 is there's knight takes c3 at the end of that line.
Yes, well played. Just knight takes c3, queen takes c4. The queen was overloaded. Good call.
But I do like that idea, Robert. Again, in the spirit of making black make decisions, it's not only the objective value of the move. When you go under a minute, I mentioned this earlier, but forcing your opponent to be the one to define the pawn structure sometimes forces more time off your opponent's clock. And finally, John decides on b5. It's a little bit safer here. now that one pair of bishops has been wiped off the board, is Greg actually preparing to take on d5? I don't think so. Not just yet. c4. Whoa.
Ooh, okay.
Very committal move.
And take, and the b4 pawn is now defended. That was the point of rook to b1. So once the trade happens, it's all safe and sound for white. But the question is, has it actually helped white? The pawn on a3 is maybe easier to spy on because the whole third rank is open. But I like John's move, queen f6, trying to trade down into an endgame. And note that the queen on f3 is so important to white's position because that's c3 square. That's one that knight wants to jump into. And the dark squares in particular, it's not that there's going to be an attack or anything of that sort. You have a light square bishop. Light square bishops cannot compete for dark squares. So if the knight were able to get to f4 in the future, well, there's no knight anymore to talk about, but then it would be harder to kick out. So taking on d5, how do you take back, Donnie, with the rook?
Yeah. I would take with the rook. And John and I have an inside joke that goes back a long way, where I noticed that John loves to have his knight on d5. He loves the outpost on d5. And here we see another instance of that. Now that knight has been very ably replaced by a rook. I feel like this should bail out into a draw. John can't get too casual because his pawns on c6 and a3 are very weak. And here he decides to transform the position. I feel like he's going for a bailout here. De rook e5, but I kind of like his position. That pawn on a3, if he sticks a rook on e2, that could all of a sudden get very unpleasant for white.
So rook e2 here, I mean, just exactly what you were saying. And now white
should be a draw.
Yeah, it should be, but maybe white will have to be a little bit passive.
Don't take on a3.
Yeah, do not take on a3 because after rook a3, queen a3, there's queen takes f2 check. Your queen no longer pins the black queen to g7 if it's distracted over to the a3 square. So do not take the pawn on a3. What other moves come to mind though? Queen f6, king f6, maybe then just some kind of, I want to go rook f3 check, but I'm not sure it's actually useful to throw on that.
Yeah, but that's what I was saying. The problem is after rook takes a2, rook a1 check and a2 becomes a huge threat, and then you can't stop the pawn from promoting. How does Greg deal with that?
Is he
17 seconds and counting now?
Yeah, This was a bad decision. I think he needs to take on c6 and play rook c1, but that looks shaky after even rook b2 there.
Below 10 seconds now. I don't see a defense. He might just have to abandon that c-pawn. He wants rook c1.
And b5 doesn't work. You want to play b5, rook a6. Oh, wait, rook takes f2? Okay, or rook
this
b2.
This might be a clincher because, my goodness, a2 is coming. Takes b3 and a2. John wins another one.
Wow, and that really fell apart for Greg in just like 3 moves there. Right? Like the position was totally fine.
Totally good. And all of a sudden we blink and he's lost.
Wow. So JB, he's managing this very well here. He's been able to make the most of the positions where he's feeling comfortable. But Greg really didn't have any business losing that game until he went rook d6 check, and then his position quickly collapsed.
John, like a rattlesnake, waiting for his opportunity to strike patiently. He's not beating himself. And this has been a theme in many of these matches. At least it's impressed me how cleanly a lot of these players are playing. John, one might argue, not going to win any brilliancy prizes, but what he is doing is playing sound positional chess. Greg is getting nervous at some point. He's transforming the position in an unfavorable way. And John, incredibly precise at pouncing on his opportunity. He's not letting anything go to waste here.
It's very true, because right now it feels like John's had 2 advantages and he sees 2 full points from those advantages. Greg has had 2 games with the advantage and he scored only 1 out of 2 draws in those.
I feel like John's trying hard not to smile right now. Is it just me, or is anybody else noticing that? He's just keeping that slight, the slightest inkling of a John smile there.
Right. He doesn't want to let you know that he's happy. And that's the sign of a very serious.
Exactly.
But b3, this is thematic, right? You're hitting this pawn on c4. You'd like to take back with the a pawn. And what you're doing is white is capturing towards the center, and black is losing a c pawn for an a pawn. And then white will play c4, make some progress in the position in that manner. So good trade. It takes the queen.
Okay. That's a creative recapture.
He just, I guess, claiming that the queenless middle game will be good for him. But I don't know, Donnie, I like just a takes b3.
I feel like you didn't need to reinvent the wheel here. I don't know. I wouldn't take on b3 if I were black. I would consider even queen c7, sacking that pawn on d5. I mean, I don't think John's going to take it then because of bishop e6, but I would not allow, and that's what he does. Maybe John could snap on d5, take on f6, take on d5. I don't see a concrete refutation, but if he doesn't, then Greg's got that Grunfeld style play that he had in the first game with knight a5.
Right, and the pawn on c3 is now a backward pawn, one that will require defense, and it's easy for black to pile up on. So I'm with you that bishop takes f6 is a scary move to play, but he does it. He realizes, hey, I'm just going to take a pawn and run away with it.
He's feeling brave, and that's annoying to face when you're losing games and your opponent keeps daring you to refute a certain sequence. That's one of the most frustrating feelings you can experience. And I don't think Greg's already done it in the best way. Now that queen can tuck itself away on b2. Black's going to struggle for compensation there. White's going to slam a rook onto c1. And that c4 square alone is not going to give you sufficient compensation.
And if you ever played b5 for black, the knight can come from d2 to e4 and into c5. So you may get c4, I get c5, and just white is up a pawn in this situation. The bishop on f6 is black's quote-unquote advantage in the sense that black is a dark square bishop, white does not, but it's not doing anything. There's no open diagonal to work with. And in fact, the knights are very happy in such a situation.
Yeah, and Greg doing what he has to. He plays b5. John can play a4 here, immediately trying to blast open the queen side. But there's not necessarily any hurry. He could marginally improve his position with bishop d3, preparing to double rooks on the c file. He does play a4. John feeling very brave in this game. He's making some committal decisions, but it's paying off in the most positive way possible here.
In knight c4, speaking of committal decision, that's offering a trade, but Greg really didn't have much of a choice because the pawn on b5 was just directly under threat. So are you taking with the bishop on c4?
I would totally take with the bishop because if bc, that knight could leap out of its cage to e4 and then to c5.
Right. And if knight c4, bc4, the bishop on e2, not exactly doing so much yet. White can play e4 and expand the center. But as soon as you start pushing your pawns, that dark square bishop can at least dream of having a more useful diagonal.
And John playing queen c2 again, not capturing at all, making Greg be the one to decide the pawn structure. I think a very sensible decision because he's obviously not worried about knight takes d2. He's just going to recapture and renew the threat against the b pawn. Yeah,
but maybe this is a practical choice, just not giving an open b file for the black rooks. This is for the queen on b2. That's a tempo move. So rook b8 played by Greg. And knight to e4 is possible. I was mentioning that c5 square earlier. So I don't actually like taking on it on b5 first because knight e4 comes, and with a pawn on a6 and a pawn on a4, once knight c5 happens, the pawn on a6 was hanging. So it still has a threat, of course.
Rook a6 maybe?
I like the question.
Rook takes c6.
The pawn on f7 is overloaded. I see what you're doing here, but he plays knight e4.
So
if you were going to play knight e4, I think you should have left the pawns on a6 and a4, but even this looks good. You could take on f6, you could play knight c5, which still threatens knight a6. There may not be a pawn there, but there's a fork on queen on c7, rook on b8. So I think we both really, really like John's position here. And this is dangerous territory for Greg because he's down 2. You cannot afford to be down 3 to John Bartholomew.
No, because again, John doesn't beat himself. He's such a hard player to beat, especially several games in a row. You can get one game off of John occasionally, but if he gets to a big lead and he starts playing very solidly, that's very, very, that's trouble for Greg. And there isn't that much time left in the 5-minute portion. Obviously, time is not yet a consideration at all, but Greg's not feeling great right now. And I would even consider going bishop f5 in this position, trying to change the dynamic of the game. Sometimes when everything's going wrong for you, there's a micro and a macro scale you could do this. I would change some openings if I were Greg, and in this game, I would try to trade some pieces, change the pawn structure, at least make John orient himself to some sort of new challenge.
That's actually something that I believe a lot of people struggle with is my position is worse. I'm down a pawn. Nothing's going my way. But you're going to be worse regardless in this position. So if you can change the nature of the game from one where white's is clearly better to shifting the attention to either a new file or creating a pawn structure that's not symmetrical, often that can help your chances to hold the game. But here, in comes that knight to c5, and where's that bishop going? If you go to d5, I go e4. I'm happy to kick your bishop away, and then maybe play e5 myself. So
and e6.
Yeah, this
Marshawn Lynch style, just ramming through the defense.
Go full on beast mode here.
And here you could play knight e1, bishop f3, involve that bishop. That knight on e1 can then run around to d3 and b4, the end around. Okay, that's it for my football references for today.
I've been enjoying them better than your terrible puns. So,
well, is that so?
Yep.
Well,
I actually
I would
like
say better than your puns if you'd made any, but
I try to stick to the chess because that's what I'm here for. But knight e1, I like your move, Danya. Just saying, hey, my knight on f3, it looks good. It's sitting on a square that's nicely developed, but my bishop would be better suited on the f3 square. And knight to d3, knight into b4, you're just creating pressure, adding some to the black queen side. So a knight e1 is possible. I think it's maybe a little bit too slow for John's style, at least right in this position. I'm looking at e4 just to, why not just throw that pawn forward?
Yeah, that's a good move as well. I mean, it's hard to go wrong in a position like this. White center is so sound. John decides to trade rooks.
Not a move I would have played.
I know. He's giving up that A file. I'm not sure what follow-up he has in mind. What was the necessity of that? And he's just taking everything. Now, I guess he wants to attack that pawn on b5. No, he takes on c4.
Okay, the bishop on f6 isn't that good, but you have just ceded control over the A file, so rook a2 at some moment. But okay, he's bringing his other knight in. Maybe this is actually just strong.
Maybe it is. I mean, John Trade-Bartholomew. But I give John a lot of flack for that. But obviously, I have the greatest respect for his positional play. And as a matter of fact, after queen d5, queen e4, you trade queens. I'm laughing at this, but that pawn on b5 starts to feel mighty uncomfortable with no pieces surrounding it. So very sensible, very practical decision by John here.
Yeah, knight d2. And the knight can go to e4, the queen can go to e4, as you said. The knight can go to b3 to c5, but the b5 pawn in general, rook b1 at the right moment. So queen a2 by Greg, understanding that any endgame is going to favor white, but with a rook on a2, perhaps I can pressure the f2 pawn at some moment. I don't see it. I'm just trying to grasp at straws here because I don't like black's position one bit. But with a rook on a2, at the very least, you're creating some semblance of a threat and may bring your rook behind some of white's pawns.
Yeah, I mean, and in these positions, that's all you can do is create some semblance of counterplay. That's where real counterplay starts. You have to introduce a slight inkling of doubt into your opponent's mind about his prospects of winning, and the mistakes can follow. Now, the question would be, if black manages to get that c-pawn for the b-pawn, how do you evaluate that position? I think that's still lost. I mean, look at those holes that Greg has just introduced. e6, I feel like John can just take on b5, and practically speaking, that's going to be tremendously hard to defend for black.
Yeah, what black will need to do is somehow take on c3, play f4, try to get the d4 pawn. But as you point out, the e6 square is so nice for this white knight. But the king will come to f7 and try to kick you out of there. So one thing to note, Danya, that we should remind viewers of is if the b and c pawns get traded and the minor pieces get traded, rook in 5 versus rook in 4 when all the pawns are connected, that's not an easy task. In fact, most of those positions are actually theoretically drawn, but there's still a lot left to prove, especially when both sides are about to be under 30 seconds.
Yeah, I once had to draw one of those endgames for a GM norm. Not easy at all. And John can gain as much time as he wants moving back and forth. Here, he's spending a lot of time really trying to find the best, the most precise continuation.
F4?
I think he oversimplified this a little bit. F4 is a great move.
F4, he missed it.
Rook e3 at the end. What an idea.
Yeah, hey, man, I appreciate the kind words. I was going for that.
That's very nice, though. I have to give you my hats off there. He goes F4 here, but it's not the same effect. But John getting very low on the clock here.
Rook b3. Play rook b3 here.
Yeah, solidify.
There it is. He's protecting his
and
e3
just king
pawn.
f3. He's definitely made a bit of a hash of this, but he still has a lot of winning chances.
He has. And the bad thing for Greg's drawing chances, in some endgames, you look at a bishop, you look at a corner square. Knights don't have that same problem because knights can move from color complex to color complex. But Greg here, he's only down one pawn. And so if he can, say, sacrifice his bishop for a couple pawns, that gives him some increased drawing chances. But, 4.7 seconds left for John. So knight f4, e5. E5, there's rook b7 check. And where's the king going? G8, knight e6.
Bartholomew and time pressure here, Caro Magno. Bartholomew playing 4 seconds left. Dramatical finish.
E4.
G5. Now king f4. King f4. Yep. 2 seconds. Got to watch this clock.
All right, but now the two pawns are connected. What was
D6 coming in, and this is just going to be so hard to defend.
I didn't know what the knight was doing, rerouting and stuff like that, but okay.
Even knight h6 there. John is mixing up some ideas, but now d7. He should have gone d7 immediately.
Bishop f6. Bishop f6. The bishop's holding.
He's in the game. He's let his king out of the cage. H4.
Oh my gosh, and the rook is tied down to the d7
H3.
Rook d7 or h3.
Oh my goodness, knight h4, and it's a draw. He's got to take it h4. He's got 2 seconds.
He didn't take it.
Oh
What's
my goodness!
doing?
Deuce H2 now. Black is the one with winning chances. Rook
Rook
H2.
H7.
When the pawn Rook H7, Knight H1.
Oh my God, he's gonna flag.
He's gonna lose time.
Oh, he barely got 0.2 seconds left.
Oh my
King
goodness! And
E6.
he managed
Bishop
to free
E5.
move. Oh.
Bishop E5. I think he might be winning. Rook F7. Why do you go for a draw?
Why did he offer a draw?
Why would you offer a draw?
Why did he offer a draw? He's
Why?
got so many chances.
Why would you offer a draw?
Oh my goodness.
Greg, what are you doing? You need to win the game.
Oh my! I can't believe it. I mean, he's got free rook. Get the rook to A1. Even if you win the knight for the pawn, it's such a winnable position.
Okay, we got to show them the analysis board. We're already just on the edge of our seats. Greg Shahade in a position where only he can win. There is a knight that is planted on the worst square a knight can get to on H1, defending this pawn. And the knight can't move because let's say in the game continuation, King E2, King moves to D6, whatever. You can't even go Knight F2 because I sack my rook for your knight and then I get a queen. So that knight was stuck there. And I'm not trying to claim that Black's position was objectively won or anything like that, but you cannot agree to a draw when you're down 2 points in a match and only you can win the position.
You can't. Yeah.
Man, so go to the live game because I am frustrated to see that for Greg. It just shows that he's not trusting his bullet skills, and that is a big issue when you're already down 2 points and John is the favorite in the match.
And you think about it, you win that game, it's a 1 point game. That just sounds different, but I'm surprised John did not win. I mean, John had many, many chances to win. I think John just got nervous. He got a little frustrated in himself that he didn't win earlier, but he kept mixing. I mean, so many chances. D7, he should have taken that pawn.
Danya.
It's easy for me to say, but still.
No, Danya, you can't spell many, many chances without man. So,
man. Yeah, John.
I mean, that was just a missed opportunity there. And look at this position that we have in this game with the doubled F pawns for Black. That's not the worst thing in the world. What's often happens is there's tension on the D5 square. So White should just probably castle here. But what Greg is trying to calculate is if he castles, can then Black play D takes C4? Because usually you'd have D5 as a move that hits the knight and the bishop at the same time, but there's bishop takes C3. So he ends up taking on D5 first, so that when he has castles, there will be a threat on the D5 square.
I think Greg recognizes that draw offer. He's furiously gyrating his head side to side. He's shaking his head. I think it's sort of the case, and I've done this many times, where you take a draw, even in over the board chess, you come back to your hotel room, and you what was I thinking? I had a free winning chances. What got into me? Why did I take that draw? And it's so hard to play the next game when that thought is in your mind.
Yeah, and we have an opposite colored bishop's position here where White is sort of like up a pawn, right? Because if you look at the material, White has a pawn on D4, and it's going to be attacked very soon, but that's in unopposed isolated queen pawn. Black has a 4-on-3 on the king side, but part of that 4 is the doubled F pawn. So it's not easy to create a passed pawn or to fend off some of White's threats. So I actually really like White's position here. Maybe I'm kind of overestimating the power of not having double pawns, and the knight and bishop and queen teaming up in D4 should give Black compensation. But somehow I just like the fact that White has this central pawn.
Yeah, I mean, that pawn, there are opposite color bishops and Black's got that solid structure, but I do agree. I think White is the one with a certain degree of pressure. Even if the queens are traded, that pawn at some point can, especially if it lands on D7, the problem with the opposite colored bishops is it's a very hard pawn to get to. It's permanently defended by that bishop on A2. I still think that John's pieces are active enough to where he shouldn't really have any problems holding his own here.
Well, what Greg needs to do at some moment is H4, H5, because then you can reroute your bishop and your queen onto the diagonal heading towards H7. And for the time being, until you can get H4, H5, Black can play F5, G6, things like that to shut down and not even entertain that idea. So H4 probably is just too risky to play, especially with bishop on B6 there at the F2 pawn. But that's an idea that I'm thinking about in the long term.
Well, together with that draw offer, I mean, and investing in Tesla, I mean, those are two of the worst decisions you could be making. But, we'll see how Greg handles this situation. But Greg, I feel a little bit concerned about his position here. These knight G4 ideas, Robert, something about this doesn't sit too well with me.
And, well, John plays G6 to stop Greg's one threat. When he put his knight to D4, he, of course, want to get to F5. So what does white do in a position like this? He goes knight to b5. I guess the knight on c3 is pretty good, just protecting the pawn on d5, maybe going to e4, because now that black has committed this pawn to g6, the f6 square is a little bit looser. I mean, knight c3 already threatens ideas.
Yeah, but f5 and knight g4 comes in. I feel like maybe white should play d6 and just throw all caution to the wind. The problem there is rook d8, John, king g7. Such a John move, but a good one, a good one. Getting the king out of that diagonal.
Yeah, it's d6 will just probably lose that pawn. You know, oftentimes the clearance move, right? You give up the pawn to clear the square d5 for a knight or a queen or whatever, but all of black's pieces working well together, and there's no attack for white to take advantage of. So queen e2 played.
Rook e8 maybe?
Let me ask you something. So, you know, you talk about knight g4 ideas. We're talking about the d5 pawn. It just feels like the longer the game continues, sort of the more white has going for him in a position when you have the passed pawn. So kind of what's your psychology like if you're taking this position from the black side?
Well, I would actually orient myself toward an attack on the king. I feel like white's king is far from safe here. So what I would try to do is maybe go rook e8 and then go f5, knight g4. A little bit anti-positional because it introduces more weaknesses on my own king side. But if you can get a knight on g4 and a queen on d6, that's going to be very hard to defend against because g3 makes, you know, a host of other weaknesses there. Remember, opposite colored bishops, it not only lends drawish tendencies to the position. We've discussed this before. In a middle game, it lends a distinctly tactical aura to the position because a bishop operates uncontested on a diagonal. If that diagonal has to do with the safety of the king, that's pretty hard to deal with. So I would play rook e8. I would go for the attack here if I were John. And I like just chasing the knight around.
I like what you're pointing out though, because the f2 square, it's not a easy target, but it's something that needs to have an eye kept on it. And the bishop on a2 is useless. It's protecting a pawn on d5, so that's good.
Well,
but the bishop itself is not very valuable outside of that. So knight on e4 is being kicked. Where does it go? If you go knight d2, there's rook c2 ideas. Rook d1.
There's also an idea potentially if bishop a7, knight g3, queen d6. Let's say white incautiously plays queen to d2. That allows knight f3 check and queen takes g3. So that's just a small example. We're a little bit choreographed, but that just shows you that white's king is never really safe in these positions.
That's a very good point. But actually, now that the bishop is under attack, some sort of knight discovery for white, like bishop a7, knight c5, or something like that, right? Because, it takes.
Okay, so he transferred rook c1 check, but I didn't see it there. I mean, even rook d1. Even rook d1 and that passed pawn, you kind of called it, Robert. That starts being a little bit scary. What does John have up his sleeve here?
He does have some kind of queen d6, f5, king f6. Like, his moves actually are not very hard to play
queen b5,
after trading.
But then you take and go queen f1. Oh, maybe queen b5 is not so bad for black.
Oh.
That endgame, that pawn is both a strength and a weakness in the purest sense of the word, but the king can come to d6 there.
So queen b5, queen takes, rook d1, queen f1, we trade. And then the black king so quickly goes right over to the d6.
Yeah.
So it may be f8, I'm not sure.
Yes, Robert, yes.
Exactly. Push him, baby. And John wisely thinking here.
There's also some crazy ideas. Knight f3 check takes, queen f3, queen f5. But I was trying to pull an Adam story against you based on this classical game, but then just queen e2.
Yeah, you're getting too crazy, man.
Well, I am crazy.
Queen
you
b5.
Can't get too crazy. There we see it. He was just evaluating that endgame very wisely because he can make a lot of pre-moves if Greg does take on b5. Does he even have an alternative?
No, because otherwise you take on d1 and b2 fall. So
yep, I don't think he does. I don't know what he's thinking about.
I'm looking for an alternative, but there is no. King f1 walks into a pin, right? That would be
That's a great
tragic
move.
end. But you can just take your rook on d1 because your queen is no longer defending it. So you don't actually have any other move besides queen takes b5. And then we get to this very interesting endgame where the pawn e4 is useful. I mean, it's kind of active, but at the same time, it is potentially vulnerable because the king comes to e2, comes to e3 really quickly. And some kind of pawn structure with g6 to e4, I have a light squared bishop. So if my bishop can get an open diagonal somehow to attack that base pawn, things can be looking up. But okay, king f6, is there just d6 is that the point?
The onus is on white. The onus is on white too. Oh, that's a nasty little move, but it's very concrete. Maybe d6 and bishop, but bishop d5. There's another fork on f4. Look at the amount of forks here. Knight c1, knight f4.
I'm going to pause for a second and not focus on the chess because you just pull that Onishuk line again after I've already told you not to do it. Come on, man. That is a bad line. You're so much better than that.
Okay, let me take up my notebook of Robert's comments that I actually value, which is currently empty, and I might
Knight
actually
C1
write
check?
in a line there.
Wait.
Oh my God! Wait, what is? Does he want to trap the knight? No, but that doesn't work. He's going to win that pawn on d5.
Yeah. That's a fork.
That is, and John figuring. Let's see Greg's reaction here. He has that smile on his face. He's missed it. He's no longer smiling. I thought he had a smile on his face. Let me tell you, after knight c1 on the board, he's not smiling anymore.
Nope.
EF, even he takes f3 first, but John just taking here. That knight's going to extricate itself via c1.
Yep, the c1
Not
square.
over yet, by the way, Robert. This is still king d4, king c5. There's some chances here.
Yeah, you want to get your king in really quickly to start going after the b7 pawn, but the black king will follow suit over towards the queen side and win.
B6 even. King d4, b6.
Oh, man, that's annoying.
Just trapping that king in the center. Oh, and Greg just resigns, debilitated.
And this game will be the last game, most likely, of the 5-minute and 1 second increment time control. Greg Shahade now announced 3 games to John Bartholomew. And man, John is just, you see that sip of the coffee?
Yeah. What did I tell you last time? Did I notice that or what, Robert? It's the flex. It's John's version of a flex. Let me take a sip of my fresh brewed coffee from my Mr. Coffee. Went to Target this evening. My coffee shop broke, but I got some Mr. Coffee, guys. All right, guys, enjoy. Cheers.
Oh man, I love your JB impression. Where did your lights go, by the way?
My lights will be turned on if you take the wheel for 10 seconds. I don't know if I trust you to do that, Robert.
No, I think you should, because you just went "Hello, darkness, my old friend," and it's scaring me a bit.
Say no more.
Okay, well, we have a position here where it's actually quite close. And you look at the bishop on b7, staring into a brick wall and it's pawn on d5. And so John is actually pushing on the queen side because the thematic idea is to push through with c5. And Greg fighting back. a5, you can take on b4, open up the a file. And once the a file is open, the rook on 8 on starting square is useful. So Danya, I see that you're back. You dressed up for the occasion. Your lighting is now better. In these type of structures, right, where at any moment black can take on b4, but also c5 is a threat for white to consider for himself. Do you tend to prefer playing with this from the white or black side?
I think what space advantage is it's compensated by black's easy play.
I actually, as a King's Indian player, I personally don't mind playing with an absence of space, and I have a predilection for those pawns on e5 and f5. I like that play. At the same time, as soon as white gets c5 in these positions, things can crumble very quickly for black. So I think objectively white is definitely slightly better, but I believe in black's position in these types of situations when you don't have a lot of space, but you have a lot of sort of latent tactical chances. That a file can also open. Notice that white is the one who has to constantly think about that, because a takes b4 can come at any moment. And white can't get too casual because that a file can cost them potentially.
Very true. And actually, the c5 move, as I was about to say, requires another piece, because c5, if you just looked a moment ago, I would just take, and if you take, my knight can capture on c5. And sometimes you sacrifice the pawn to open up the c file, but it's also very risky to do something like that in the rare situation where you don't win it back. But knight b3 played to go for c5, but if you play c5 too early, black has this a4 move, trying to kick the knight away from b3. So there's actually a lot of different tactics. And then white has c6. I went all the way to c7 with my arrow, but c6. So it's like, can white punch through c5? Is black going to take on b4 first? What's going on and why?
Yeah, it's a position that a lot of people would roll their eyes and yawn at, but there's definitely a lot going on here beneath the placid surface. E4 by Greg, a move that has a strength and a weakness. I mean, he's preparing potential knight e5, but it does weaken that d4 square. And that d4 square, if white sticks a knight there, could be an avenue to e6 and to b5. So I would consider rook d1 if I were John. But then Greg has this idea of taking on b4 and going rook a2. Is that something, or is that a little over-optimistic?
I like it, even if it's not something, because it looks fun. And actually, he's going for it, because the queen on c3 is very powerful there. And the downside is handing over the a file to white, but because there's a queen on the a file, nice find, Danya, and nice find by Greg. The point is that after queen a2, queen c3, your queen needs to stay attached to your knight, and black is going to go rook 8 and take the a file over himself. So actually, that was a huge find for Greg's chances.
The only reason I was a little pessimistic is because after queen takes rook, there's this move knight d4. And my point is, even if you give away the whole house on the queen side, b4 and c4, as soon as that knight lands on e6, from my King's Indian experience, that spells trouble virtually regardless of the position that you're in. Maybe it's not such a big deal here, but I would consider that if I were John as kind of a practical chance. Something like queen c1 just seems way too passive, not to mention that e2 pawn will hang.
Right. I'm totally with you there. Also, black has some ideas with f4, depending on what white does, because the queen and the rook are ready to open up the f file and create an attack, especially with this rook on a2. So I think you have to take on a2. And after queen c3, your knight d4 move is a good-looking one. So I would certainly consider that if I were John. He's spending a lot of time here, so he must take on a2, right?
I think I might invite knight d4 on a date. You said that's a good-looking move.
Oh, gosh.
That was the most forced laugh I've ever. You can do better, Robert. I thought you were a good actor.
Well, I just want to let you know that I don't appreciate your tremendously awful jokes sometimes.
Okay, duly noted. Let me write the second entry. I have a pen ready for the occasion. Let me write the second entry in that notebook.
Well, I'm going to give a shout out to Jen Shahade because I see she's in the chat. She's saying, go, Greg. You can come back from this deficit. That is sibling love at its finest. Of course, Jen Shahade needs very little introduction as she is a mainstay of the St. Louis Chess Club commentary, a fantastic player herself with multiple U.S. Women Chess Championships, the Poker Grid, or the Grid, but it's a poker podcast that's really excellent. And I don't know. Nothing really more needs to be said about Jen, except for the fact that maybe rooting for her brother is the wrong pick in this match. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Jen. I think you might want to reconsider it. No, of course, we're kidding. Big honor to have so many great people in the chat. So warm welcome to Jen. And we're still going to continue roasting Greg. So maybe Jen is thinking that we're going to tone it down. We're not.
No,
are we?
Certainly not. Your knight e6 idea, by the way, Danya, is also, there's a knight b5 idea. So queen c3, knight b5 hits the queen and hits c7.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happens. I feel like between the two of us, we've predicted the last 15 moves of this game.
Well, queen takes b4 was probably not the right move. Rook a8 first, I guess.
Yeah, he kind of did it by inertia, just take the pawn. But now queen a7 and knight c7, yep.
Yeah, that's not going to be fun. And the b6 pawn is weak. It requires the knight to be tied down to it. And this knight can go to e6 via c7 instead of via d4. So, yeah.
John's lips are starting to rise up ever so imperceptibly, but I've spent enough time with John to know when he's feeling good about his position. He's feeling good about his position right about now.
He should be feeling good about his position, but what can black do to create counterplay? Is there some kind of f4, e3 type of move just to make John feel uncomfortable around his king? Because you do have more pieces, a queen and a rook, perhaps trying to aim at the king. He plays f4. It's out of necessity more than desire.
Yeah, desperation, but it's not necessarily desperation. I mean, things could turn in an instant with e3 in the mix. I'm just a little worried about knight e6 here, just coming back, because after f takes g3, we could even take back on g3. You don't have to take the rook. Black has a very, very narrow window of opportunity here. If that closes and black doesn't whip anything up, his position will start just to crumble here.
Yeah, the one thing that I guess black has to consider is rook a8 if ever knight e6. So you can, you're first focusing on the f file, the king side, then you say, wait a second, let me go over to the a file, because that is really the only open file on the board. And so if I can take over that file, maybe I'll get some counterplay in that manner. But it doesn't look like it's easy to kind of amount to anything more than just what looks like a natural looking move. And there's knight e6. I think rook a8.
I agree. You have to keep some tension on the board. Yep. Wow. Maybe we should be playing this match instead.
Is g takes f4 a possibility here?
I was thinking about it, and because queen e6, there's queen takes a8, but John quickly going queen c2, very practical, saving time.
Hey,
what now? Rook a1?
Do you think that John's a practical player?
Nah, John Bartholomew practical. No, those two words don't even belong in the same.
I like that
paragraph.
move e3. I love that move e3 because rook a1, there's bishop takes e4.
But what about gf and then king takes f2? I understand you're getting my king out, but is that really anything there? Maybe queen f6, maybe some checks. I agree.
Yeah, I would take on f2 and then probably a queen f6 move, then try to go knight c5 and dislodge your really annoying knight from e6. It's not enough. I mean, I think we both acknowledge that white is for a choice here. But when you're getting down to that 1 minute bullet time control part of the game, you want to create some threats and not just sit back and get rolled over.
Definitely. And John, my guess after, queen h5, I was expecting queen f6, but this does make a lot of sense. Queen to c3, threatening checkmate. If knight f6, that drops the b6 pawn. Maybe black has to do that and try to get knight g4 check in, but I just don't trust that. I mean, the problem is a1 is also covered, so white's rook can safely leave the first rank without worrying about some potential rook a1 check.
And rook takes b6, we'll see that one. And
knight g4 check, though?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? This king is not exactly safe, so queen
rook
g3.
a2, oh, there's mate threat. What am I saying?
Oh my god, I was just drawing the arrow on the mating square, and you pulled a Vidya Gujarati, so a good work.
What if he plays it, though? He's, okay, there we go. No, he's not me. There's a reason he was invited to this tournament and not me. I'll be invited to the FM, not a GM
Rook
section.
e6, bishop f3. So maybe bishop f3 first, just to keep every square, the g4 square under your control, and then take on b6. I don't actually see any counterplay.
Yeah, that in white. I mean, black is the king safety problem, and white's going to be 3 pawns off after he vacuums up b6 and d6.
Though we did see time trouble not go JB's way in that endgame. So he takes first on b6.
Okay. I guess you can do that, but
Knight
what about
G4
knight
check?
g4?
That's what I was wondering. Wait,
King e1? I guess king e1, king d2.
Oh, I don't like that. Then rook a1, rook a2.
Yeah, no, I agree. Queen f5 in the mix there as well.
What, knight g4?
Okay, but now bishop f3 and resign.
Knight e4 check.
Oh, knight e4.
Knight e4.
Okay, but still lost there. I think king e3.
All right, but barely. I mean, that's...
But barely. Oh my god, he played it. Okay, John's got to find king e3 here.
Yep.
He definitely misses because king g2, there's rook takes e2.
Yes, so king e3 only
goodness.
move. And king e3.
And he found a rook a3.
Rook a3 check. Oh my
queen
god.
Queen f5, queen f6 is perpetual.
No,
Queen
you take on e6.
You might win.
Yeah, then you take on e6.
This might be winning. Okay,
wait, so
what
rook
about
a3 check?
King d4?
Oh my gosh, king
knight g3? No, I don't think that's good.
No, I don't think it's good either.
Oh my goodness, that was amazing complications, and now John is just completely winning. Greg had to see that.
And how many extra pawns does white have?
A million. I mean, 3, I think.
Yeah, and e4 just...
e5, and now this position plays itself. That's the problem. John with plenty of time here. King d4.
Rook d1 check.
That
steal
is
the pawn.
Still a game, I guess.
Yeah,
But king d6, rook e7, anything wins, I think.
Just don't get mated, and he gives himself the f7 square to run away to. Oh, wait a second. That's one repetition.
Yeah, careful, John. Okay, rook e7. King d6 and c5. I mean, the problem is it's just impossible to defend.
Knight before.
Greg trying. He's very tenacious.
Yep. Rook c1, c6. Now you got to put. Whoa.
Oh, that's not going to do it.
Okay, that won't do it. That's for sure.
The problem is, at some point, you're going to make the decisive mistake. And what a game and what a save.
We're going to go, before we go to the break, we are going to go over this game very briefly here. Where was it? Back after bishop
Move
to f3.
33.
Move 33. Danya and I were both looking at rook a3 check. The king has nowhere to escape to on the second rank. The knight covers the squares. If you go king takes e4, queen f5 check, king d4, queen f6 check, king e4. You can only go through these two moves. The queen takes e6.
I have to show
check,
something.
because the pawn is pinned and queen e3 mate. What do you got to show? Tell me.
If king d4 on move 34, trying to sidestep that check.
Yep.
Knight takes g3, bishop takes queen.
Oh my god.
And you can do the honors, Rob.
Yeah, knight f5, king e4, rook e3, check and mate. So unfortunately for Greg, he had a tactical just death blow, a knockout punch, and he missed it. And with that, John Bartholomew goes to a 4-point lead. Danya and I will be right back. We'll take a few-minute break, but when we return, we'll be ready for the 3-minute time control of this epic I Am Not GM Speeches Championship match brought to you by Chess.com. And as we gear up for the 3+1 segment of this I Am Not GM Speeches championship match, John Bartholomew has a huge lead. He's up 4 points over Greg Shahade. We've had some topsy-turvy games, but when John's back has been against the wall, he's been able to save his position. And Greg, when he's been in some trouble, unfortunately, he's fallen victim to either a devastating attack or just missing his opportunity. So, Danya, at this point in the match, what are Greg's chances like? And if you were his coach, what would you say to him?
Well, it's hard not to speak in platitudes and remember all those motivational scenes from movies, Karate Kid, movies like that. So Greg's got to put things into perspective. He's down 4 points. Yes, that's a lot, but you've got a big 3-minute segment ahead of you. And the way you should think about it is not, I have to equalize this before the bullet. He's got to bring this under control. Even if he gets 2 points off of John's lead before the bullet segment, that's more than enough. So he's got to think about this one game at a time. And when he views this as, I just got to get 2 points off of John, rather than I have to make a 4-point comeback, that sounds a little bit different. And psychologically, I think that'll lessen the load for him. He definitely can't let this get out of control, though. He can't lose 2 more games. That's going to be a total disaster.
Yeah, I think I would frame it that, as I get into the bullet, I want to be down 2 games. So I don't know where you're going to get those 2 points from, but you're going to pick them up along the way. But that way you don't feel like I need to win this next game, and I need to win the game after that, because that puts too much pressure on each individual moment in each game. So I think that having that broader perspective of saying where you would like to be heading into the bullet is important. And Greg, right now he can't buy a win because he has 3 draws to his name, and John, on the other hand, has 4 victories. So it just feels like this match, though I would say it's been very back and forth by how the games have gone, by the score, it's just completely one-sided in John's favor.
Yeah. No, I mean, Greg's got to realize that, like you said, a lot of these games are very close. They're 50-50 games. And it's easy to say, but Greg's got to be more confident in those time scrambles and those highly tactical positions. And we'll see whether he's able to implement these changes as we see another Karo Khan. No Scandi yet. Maybe we should disqualify John, and that will just end the match. Well,
that's what Greg was saying. He was like, I should get a point for every time I play E4 and John doesn't play Scandi. And I also see International Master Teddy Coleman, shout out to him, saying he knows what it's like to be down by 4 games. It's very tough. And as he just played Alina Kaplanskaya on Thursday, you get down 4 games against such a strong player, you may think that it's not possible even to make a comeback. But this particular opening by John playing A6 and then having this structure here, I can't even highlight because they're making moves and now it's all gone. So, what I was trying to say was some of the dark squares on the queen side could become a problem, but this idea is standard for white. Throw your knight into e5, gain space in the position, and you can take on g6 if you'd like, but h4 is a good move to throw in because h5 just traps the bishop, if you allow me to.
This might be trouble for John. I guess he can play knight takes e5, and then he's got that d5 pawn that's kind of hanging, although maybe not because of bishop e4 ideas, but I feel like he's gotten caught in a little bit of preparation here. Maybe d4 in this position. Yep. h5. Greg playing super quickly. I don't know if he's bluffing or not. I don't think so, because queen takes queen and hg. That looks very nasty for black. That looks like a nasty endgame because black has to ruin his pawn structure. White's got 2 bishops, and he's ahead in development.
It looks great for white because, look at this knight on g8, by the way. Where's that piece going? The pawn e5 also keeps that knight out of the center. And you cannot take with the H pawn as you would like to because it's pinned. So I would actually even consider bishop takes b2
I would
here.
too. That's a very interesting positional sacrifice.
Yeah, just say, if you're going to take me on g6, you have to take with the f pawn anyway.
I would do that. I would totally do that because also after fg, there's bishop d3, intending bishop takes g6, although, or even rook takes h7 there.
Right.
Greg thinking he's doing a good job just to think here. Oh, what about rook h? No, what am I saying?
I know what you wanted to do. I was thinking the same thing, but he ends up taking the pawn first. So it's even material. But what I like about this for black is that e6 happens. There it is. And all of black's pieces are free. So the benefit of giving up the pawn was that black would have to spend more time to develop. And black's already out of this. I don't
like that decision at all by Greg. He's giving John free development. He can't even take on b7 because of rook to b8, skewering the bishops. And now if the knight comes to f4, that's disaster for Greg. So maybe he has to try to push f4 through. But knight g6, this has gone out of his hand again.
Wait. The h7 pawn can be captured, right? Like rook d8, rook takes h7 now, but then there's bishop takes f2.
Right.
That's sneaky. So I'm going to show that.
Wow, that's a nice, what a tactic. That's cool.
the second rank is available for the black rook at the end of things like this.
Or knight g6 even. See, that's the problem in my eyes in a position like this. All of a sudden, white's pawn structure is the one that's crumbling and shattering and showing cracks. So Greg might have to just play f4 here and bite the bullet, try to push f5 through. But he must be feeling frustrated yet again. Another very promising opening that has evaded his grasp.
Oh gosh, this
And
line's
he
happening.
goes for it. Oh,
And bishop f2 played by John so
hey guys. A bishop takes f2, it's John. Bishop
Knight-
c5 now, or knight g6 even. Oh, but then rook f1.
Yep.
Got to be careful.
Oh, okay. The pawn on e5 is a target, and all right. I guess you don't see a way to protect it.
I don't either. I mean, c4 sacks the pawn, but that bishop also has an escape route via h4. So it's not like you can trap the bishop there.
Right. And knight g6 is coming to hit the e5 pawn one more time and to give the f4
This is
square.
nastiness for Greg. This might just be close to lost if he doesn't play super accurately to defend. And I don't see how to do that. He goes after John's pawns. That does make a lot of sense.
Right. And if a5, and then bishop a6, just trying to get to these pawns here.
Oh, he can't even take because of rook a8 and rook takes a2, bishop c3. That wins a piece. My goodness gracious, he cannot move here.
Yeah, he's stuck. So what can he play? Because
I don't know.
I'm just going to show that line you were talking about. I mean, that's a big problem with the pinned bishop at the end and losing material. So
yeah, this is just a disaster for Greg, and the time situation not on his side. He's over a minute down on the clock. If he loses this game with the white pieces, that is a big blow.
maybe rook d1 here. Just try to trade off the rooks or something like that and
Right.
make a draw. Right, your position is worse. So just try to trade things off and make a draw. Bishop a3, knight d5.
Yeah,
now.
that's why I didn't like that move. Now knight d5. Maybe you take on d5 and you swing that rook around to e8. The problem is after bishop takes c3, black's also going to threaten rook d2 takes a2. So everything is crumbling here. Greg under 10 seconds as well.
I would definitely. Oh,
I don't like that at all.
Yeah, that was not a good
That's
move.
a bad move. That's a very bad
Bishop
move by John.
b4.
It's still kind of good, but I don't know why John. Maybe he was afraid of that check, but there was nothing to worry about.
Well, I mean, now also this pawn c3 is well protected. A4 to go rook a1 and take on a4 and go after the a6
But
pawn.
now ba, and if rook a1, what about rook c4 there? Intending rook takes a4, bishop takes c3.
Oh, that's so nasty. I'm going to show it on the analysis board.
John's
That-
missing his chances here.
Show that.
Oh my God, he blundered a rook! He blundered a rook!
No, he didn't. He blundered a rook?
Oh my God, I didn't
He
think it!
blundered on b8. Oh, my
my
gosh, he just
God.
didn't take this rook. Oh my gosh.
John realizes it. Oh my God.
Oh, that is one that you regret. And yet,
Oh my goodness. Rook c3, and that also almost loses the game. And now it's a dead draw. John realized that right after he moved, and he had so much time too. I can't believe he missed that.
rook a6,
He's got to be careful now. King d3? Okay, no, then
G3?
rook c5, I guess.
g3. Okay, I would have started with g3.
But then
okay.
c7, Robert, and I feel like rook d5 check.
No, but your king was on d3, so it would be captured with check too.
Oh my goodness. You devil.
And
Greg's got to watch out. He's got 3 seconds.
3 seconds left. King h2.
Okay, king
that's
g2 and
very
g3.
smart.
Black is on the driver's seat
King
here
d3.
for sure.
Yeah, bring your king up to d4, d5. That way you just make sure your pawn's protected. You sacrifice your rook.
This is
You don't lose the
close,
game.
but he gets his king there in time. King g1. He's got to be careful.
Oh, g2.
No, what is he doing?
Okay, he's
Okay,
getting
it's
king
still
f2.
a draw. No, but he's got to be careful. King f2.
King
And
f2.
he drives by the narrowest margin.
Yes,
Rook
he
g6.
does. Yeah.
Oh, John with a very tricky little move there. Rook g6.
Okay,
King
king f2.
f2.
Wait a
Is this
second.
lo- is
King
this
f2 is rook
losing?
h2. King f1. King f2 is really smart there.
Oh, wow.
It's what?
What
Wait.
is queen?
Queen.
No, but this is not a draw. Even though there's a pawn on c7, it's not a draw.
No, it's not. Unless somehow
Unbelievable.
queen g4 check.
Queen g7 check, anything wins here.
Yeah,
John's got a million hours here to find the move. Just don't take the queen.
right. And even that was winning, but it's much harder. Man, oh man, oh man.
Greg with a incredulous smile on his face. I don't think he can believe this himself. He gave John every chance in the book there. I don't know why he didn't bring his king up to d5. And yes, here I am sitting in my comfortable cabinet criticizing, but someone of Greg's caliber should draw that position, and someone of John's caliber should also take the rook on b8.
Well, I understand why John didn't take it. He was moving so quickly.
Right.
But I mean, that was rook and pawn versus rook and pawn. And it's just clear that Greg is not feeling comfortable in time scrambles. He offered that draw from a position where only he could win earlier. He just lost rook and pawn versus rook and pawn. And, I mean, you're like, just like you said, I've also lost positions like that in time scrambles. So it happens to the best of us. So, and the worst of us, like it happened to me. But, we understand why it happens. Unfortunately, this is happening in a match situation where Greg really needed to survive that game.
Yeah, and speaking of the worst of us, big shout out to Lawrence Trent in the chat. Just kidding, of course. We love you, Lawrence. Got a lot of awesome people here today. And yeah, when the confidence gets to you, when you might start out the match full of bluster and confidence and desire to win, but a couple of these losses just take the air out of you completely.
Yeah, and right now this position for Greg is, I like his position. Right, he's more active. His bishop on g7 is staring at this pawn on b2. The knight on e5 is attacking the bishop, so the bishop retreats. And bishop f5.
Greg's better again.
Oh, Greg's much better. Bishop f5 with tempo. And now what? Do you go rook a to c8?
Yeah, just stick that rook to c2. But rook c1 holds things together for white at the moment. There's also d4 in the mix. Maybe you just rip through the center with d4. And if e4, I guess just d3.
Oof. You just push that thing. D4, you also have knight d3 play.
Okay. Reasonable move.
The benefit of playing d4 is this bishop on h4 is always just, it's hanging out there. So if you ever took on d4, once the queen captured, the bishop would have been under attack.
Yeah, I was briefly worried about g4 here, but there's no, okay, queen takes d5. What does he have in mind for this? Because queen takes b2. Okay, maybe queen takes b2 is good. I mean, when you have pieces this active, all of the tactics work out for you normally.
Right. And queen takes b2, actually, the knight can't move because the bishop on e2 is hanging. And if you play a bishop takes d3, this queen takes d2 with a pin. And then you have to play bishop d3, queen d2, bishop c4, and just try to trade queens.
Hope for the best there. But that structure with that pawn majority on the queen side is also very troublesome for white. That's definitely not the best black can do, I would think.
Well, bishop d3, queen d2, bishop c4, what else can you play? You have to take.
Oh, yeah, that f7 pawn's hanging. I didn't notice that.
But it's just this Grunfeld endgame that's amazing for black. Right? Outside pass pawns.
Rook d1 is a very much Monka-esque kind of move.
Knight c1 comes to mind. But then bishop c4, I mean, it's easy to see how black just goes a little wrong here.
Definitely
c1.
rook c1. Okay. So what's going on here? Rook takes d1 is, of course, the threat, or queen takes d2.
So queen c1, there's knight
Maybe
f1.
you take and knight f1.
How in the world can white possibly survive this?
I guess we'll have to see. But knight f1, okay, Greg can also be practical, just take on a3 there.
But then e4. Oh.
Yeah, knight f4, queen d8. Oh, but that bishop on e2 in the end hangs with check.
Right, so with the line we're talking about is if queen c1, knight f1, takes, e4, knight f4. I'm trying to, hope that when your bishop on f5, but e2 hangs with check. So that is in black's favor. As you said, the more active you are, the tactics often just work out in your favor. And there's queen takes a3.
See it? Maybe g4.
G4.
Whoa, wait a minute.
The knight c1?
Oh, that's not the margin of error that I was looking for, but maybe that does hold things together and more for black. Because bishop c4, there's always bishop to e6.
Right.
Stabilizing the situation. John definitely looking hard for one of these resources. He could also take on b7 and say, you know what? Material is equal. I could have done worse.
And then the a pawn would love to just run down the board, a5, a4, move the queen and push. The g4 played. Okay. Critical moment here for Greg.
Greg's got to be on top here because when you lack confidence and you see a move like g4, in your head, you might be spelling out that narrative, this is happening again. I screwed this up again. And that breeds blunders, of course, prematurely.
So knight c1, I think we're in agreement.
Yep, and he finds it. Kudos to Greg.
And bishop e6. But the problem is once we trade on e6, so bishop e6, queen d8 check, king h7, I take. Like this pin on the 7th rank is really annoying.
Whoa.
And the queenside pawns are in.
Oh, what a move. Bishop c4, queen c8.
Aha. But I actually don't like this as much because it feels
it's still
feels like
cool,
black's
though.
King is safer now.
It's creative, and I guess John is orienting himself on the fact that the knight on c1 is a little bit limited, but he can always evacuate via d3.
Right. So Do you play bishop f8 here? That way the pawn f7 is still defended.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. That's exactly what he does. What now, though?
Queen b4. Oh, you hang the knight at c1.
Yeah, bishop g3.
That was close, though.
B2. He's paving the way for that a pawn. John's got to whip up some counterplay stat. Maybe knight e4, knight f6.
That's pretty good.
I don't think this is clear. I'm going to
Wait,
tell you.
g5? G5? Wait, g5!
G5 just won a piece.
Oh my gosh, I have to show that g5
Still,
is
though, king g2, g5 is still valid.
Okay.
Bishop f6. John's got to move his bishop. Good catch, Robert. There we go.
Wow. So knight d3,
King g2, knight e1, king h3. But okay, I mean, somehow I can hold on there.
And the queen b7? Like knight d3.
Oh, and queen comes to g2.
Maybe I start with
surgery on that king side.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get that queen in there. It's not over yet, but it's looking pretty tough for
it is.
White.
Greg's got to make a decision, though. He's down to 15 seconds. He's got to move. There we go. Knight d3, king g2. My guess is he is going to go either queen b7 or knight e1.
Yeah, which move order is precise? I like knight
I would
e1
go knight
first.
e1. Queen d1.
Queen d1. So he's trying to get
queen c8.
Queen c8, knight e1.
King h3, queen f3.
Exactly. Then I'm checkmating you first.
Oh, what a mate g5. Funneling that king to h5.
Nice move, though. Bishop to c3, stopping any kind of e1
Queen
stuff.
c2, maybe pinning the queen.
Oh, I like that.
Look at his climb. But then queen d4, queen f2, king h3. I don't know.
Oh, I don't like this.
Okay, no. Now, White is the one with the initiative in some sense.
Yep. Very
H3.
real sense. H3 is smart. You can even play queen a7. You'll never lose that position.
That's definitely true. And John practically 5 points ahead. He's saying, why not?
Okay, and Greg's going to play on a little bit, but it doesn't feel like it. Okay, now with
Draw.
the trades.
Draw.
Yep.
Draw.
Another missed opportunity there for Greg
Another
Shahade.
bullet dodged by John. Just incredible. He cannot buy one, as you said, Robert. And that continues into the 3-minute portion.
He might lose this endgame.
He might, yeah. GF was played way too quickly. Now, knight g7 and h4. Oh.
H4, H5, bishop
Bishop
f8.
f8, get the knight back and
Bishop
start
H6.
pushing.
Is there knight g3, bishop takes e3?
Knight f4, though.
Oh.
He can play this out, and John can milk the clock here. He can milk the clock h5 and hope for the best here.
I mean, he might end up winning this game.
I would even
97?
try, knight g8.
But the king runs back, I think.
Okay, John's not going to risk it, I think. Finn's declining a draw. Look at John. He's in no way, Jose, I'm milking that clock. But f4 is not a draw. That pawn cannot be stopped at the end.
I was thinking about f4, though, to bring the king back closer. You want the king to attack this pawn h5 somehow.
John doing what he has to here. That's a good decision by him not to take the draw.
Because he might, with just 3 seconds left, it's easy to see how black makes a mistake. F4
That's
played.
a mistake, I think. E4.
And now knight f3.
Oh, Greg losing his patience
Knight d4.
there. Knight f5. Oh, my goodness.
Actually,
it might still be a draw because the bishop can give it to Greg running low on time.
Oh, my God.
H7 wins the game.
No, wins.
My God.
Oh, the king comes back. Man.
Man. If there ever was a use of man, it's this situation. Oh my goodness. Can you believe this?
It's so painful.
Unbelievable. Simply unbelievable.
I don't even have, wait, maiden 1 was missed. Queen e7 mate. But
yeah.
This maiden 2 works too.
He's walking into the end zone there.
Oh man. I'm going to pull up that game on the analysis board. It's, it is getting painful. Greg laughed it off, but it is getting painful indeed. And we'll go back to this position where he went f4. So finally he decided, I'm going to push my pawn. And John smartly did not trade, got his knight to f5. And the issue is now the bishop is just lost because after bishop g5, even bishop f8, I still go h6, h7. And then once h6 happens, you have to sacrifice your bishop. But you don't have a way to get the final pawn trade. F3, there's king e3. And after f2, there's knight g4 check. And actually, king e6, maybe there's f5 to come. So perhaps that was a draw in the end there. A missed opportunity still by Greg. But
why f4? I mean, what's inexplicable to me, he was moving his king back and forth, and he just lost his cool at some point. John had absolutely no way to make progress there. It looked a little scary, but Greg had been moving back and forth for 10 moves at that point, and all of a sudden, he gave John this opportunity to make progress.
And I do see Lawrence Trent in the chat now. Somebody call my phone so I can wake up. And Lawrence is here trying to, give some grief to his longtime rival, Greg Shahade. In this position, though, Greg with the white pieces, we have the same amount of material. We don't have a symmetric pawn structure. Black is giving up a D pawn. White's F pawn is gone. So I prefer White's position just ever so slightly, a little more activity. Now there's a potential target on E6. I would think of A3, B4, some kind of expansion on the queen side. And if Black ever plays E5, there's the F5 square for this knight to jump to.
Yeah, and I mean, from a psychological standpoint, sometimes this is what you need. Sometimes when the pressure is lifted to this extent, all of the pressure is obviously on John. Nobody's expecting Greg to win the match. Sometimes that's kind of the push that you need. You start playing a little bit more loosely. You start trusting your intuition at last. You know what? Similar comebacks have been made before. What comes to my mind is, this world championship match between Garry Kasparov and Anatoly Karpov, where Kasparov was down 5 points. Of course, it's not the same thing because this is timed.
But I think in this situation, because Bora would say, that comebacks are possible,
But John is the absolute hardest player to mount such a comeback against because of how level-headed he is. I would count on one hand the amount of times John has lost 2 games in a row. So Greg's going to have to pull something extraordinary here, but he's doing a good job in this position. He's got more time and he's got a good position.
Your Kasparov is awesome.
Thank you.
I'm looking at bishop takes F6, by the way, at some moment, just to note that the bishop on G6 will need some defense because after the rook lands on F6, there are some targets. Bishop D4 played by Greg. I can be into that move. And would you take on D4 if you were John, or would you just retreat the bishop to C7? Or are you just going to ignore my question altogether?
I was responding to a query in the chat. I was thanking everyone for the kind words about my Kasparov impression. I choose when to answer your questions, Robert. I am the one who knocks. Have to remember that.
Sounds good, because I'm here lining up, teeing them up for you, and you're just going to ignore them. But this looks great for White. Now with the bishop on G2, clearly better than the bishop on G6, and there's about to be an attack. You think, queen's retreated, no attack, but this looks real.
I promise I'll answer your next question, by the way, Robert. So make it a good one.
Okay, well, I'm going to refrain from asking for the time being.
Oh, I hurt your feelings, didn't I? Things are going so well.
No,
but at least we lasted until the 3-minute portion.
Well, it's not that you hurt my feelings. You said you were going to answer my next question no matter what, so I might as well save it up until I have a good question.
Have you seen the movie The Exam? No, I think it's called The Exam.
Because I watch good movies. It's probably a terrible movie.
It is one of those Netflix movies you click on a whim, but it was a very thought-provoking movie. It has a direct relation to the argument we just had. Just want everybody to know.
Okay. Remember that time you didn't know who Bill Withers is?
Bill Withers. Yeah. Okay. That took me a second to even remember that moment because you can tell how significant it was in my mind.
But I just want you to let you know that there is sunshine when you are gone. So, I'm okay when you're not there.
Oh, that was a knife stab right into the chest, Robert. I think this might be the last commentary we do together, so savor it.
We still have a final, right? This is not the end of it.
We do.
Oh man. Oh well, this position's looking just beautiful for Greg. Rook takes B7. Anybody?
Yeah, and Greg just played. By the way, we've slept on him a little bit. King F2, King G3. Also, Greg's been playing a fantastic game so far. He's been shutting the gates here, and then King. Yeah, I'm just worried about that Rook on H2. But if you can get it out, man.
I love people who are saying I wasted my one question on Bill Withers. I wasn't wasting my question. I'm just remembering. I'm bringing back to the time where Donnie didn't know who Bill Withers is, and that's still to this day, I guess. Anyway,
95 knight F4 is one possibility, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Man, Greg on top here. He is angry, and he is channeling that anger positively.
King G8, only move. There it is.
King F3 or King F2. You can even play King F2, E5, King G3 anyway.
Well, the bishop on G6 is hanging, so you can't play E5.
There we go.
King G3? And then...
Yeah. Just King G3, Rook H6, I guess, hangs on, but knight takes C6 there. That's got to be good.
He might sack on G2 and take on C2. That's probably his last-ditch effort, but it's not good enough. And Greg up so much time. How did this happen?
He's up a minute and a half. You know what John's about to say. 3 words repeated. Finally, for the first time in the match, assuming Greg finishes this off, Rook takes G7, Rook takes F6. Oh my goodness. Greg unloading.
4 pawns?
4 pawns and basically made. Okay, but this is the last moment he's got to be careful in. Just move the Rook away from G7.
How about just G5?
Well, okay, I think this is also good. Yes.
Was that Sean Connery?
Oh, but this was a more generic Russian accent. I don't
Well,
really
now
know.
you sound like, Nepo.
Well, okay, I said Boris Gelfand is a little bit like this kind of deep voice. But okay, Rook C7, we did for white.
You're
No, this
confusing
is
me.
just take the rook and go knight f4. He's got to win this game quickly, though. Time already does play a consideration. 20 minutes left or so in the 3-minute portion. He can't take forever to win these games.
No, he plays d4, rook takes e6, and rook takes h7 check. So now we see a trade on c7, e5 falls, then g6 falls after it, so just d takes e5.
Black resignuto. No, Sean. He's milking the clock, which is very much a valid strategy here.
It is, and rook h6 check first, and then rook c6 was probably winning more material, but instead he just trades off and completely wins.
Just don't get a bishop and knight checkmate, Greg.
How many extra pawns? 3? Is that enough?
I believe so. What do you think?
I think it is. So let's.
Okay,
I love
Greg,
how-
get down to business. Just go g6 already.
Firstly, I like this username. Mike can't read, but man gets me every time.
I'm glad
So
to hear
good.
that. Man, this is. See, I've even started. I never say man, but I've started saying it
Just because of John.
just because of John. But when he loses this game, I want you to tell me, Robert, what he is going to say right now.
He's just going to sip some coffee. He needs to, get that energy back.
And
Because,
say what 3 words?
Oh, do you see Greg with the fist bump?
Wow.
Greg was pumped to get one back there.
Now I notice Greg with this man. Greg with all sorts of acrobatics with his head.
Oh man, he is just looking forward to claiming that he did defeat John. He will add to that database of games of just John losing, but John is still so
Look
far
at
ahead.
John until look at Levy pointing out John raging, throwing mice all around the room. That king in the corner of his room is going to topple over. John taking an aggressive, angry drink of his coffee. I don't know how he's going to compose himself after this.
He just it's funny because you just have to really read between the lines there. It always looks the same, but there's a little smirk every now and then. There's a little, kind of a pang of perhaps guilt even, where he's just like, I shouldn't have won that game. I'm an honest chess player. I need to be objective with my analysis. Let me share on Twitter something I told my student that I think everybody could get some value from. So JB right now, he is, whoa, that was a big drink. That was water. That was not coffee.
Chugged that down.
Anyway, back to the chess. You're distracting me now. You're getting me in the Danya mindset.
I want to discuss the coffee, Robert. Stop talking about the chess. That's not our job.
Okay, fair. And knight c5 played. So what John is doing is he's claiming more space in the queen side. He's ready to double, and he was hitting the pawn d5, so he forced Greg's hand to play e6. But when you move this rook to c8, bishop f8 comes. And Danya, do you feel like white, how do you increase what looks like an edge for white, or is black going to liquidate with an eventual trade of the rook?
Well, we've seen something similar before, if my memory serves me right, where we had this type of endgame. Now, in that case, I think the queens were traded on b3 or on b6.
b6.
But you pointed out something there, Robert, that I think is important here, which is that even if black does manage to move his knight away from c6, trying to basically orchestrate this mass trade on the c file, white can also play rook c7 in those types of positions. And John played h4 in that position as well. So real deja vu. And Greg at that moment responded g4, knight e5, and that might happen again. He's got to be careful. I would even consider f6 here. No, same thing.
So Greg
this is bad again.
Greg did not have enough, and knight e1. So
Also possible. Look at him just chiseling his way through black's weaknesses. h5, knight d3, f4. This is nastiness for Greg.
Yeah, that pawn on g4 is already under attack. So if you play h5, play f5, I mean, how do you actually even obtain any sort of counterplay? The dark squares are all under white's control. That's a good move, though, because if g3, that takes away the king's access. You would love to play king g3 in one turn here.
Yeah, you really would. John with h5, he did that before. We see a lot of similarities with that game in the 5-minute portion. And you pointed out, Robert, this move is pretty committal because that pawn could later, in some distant future, be picked off by black's bishop. But that's not something John is worrying about right now. Look at the clamp that he has on black's position. b4 is possible here, knight f4. He's kind of spoiled for choice.
This looks really bad for black. You have no space. Knight f4 just at any moment, just a b4 as you mentioned. Even moving your rook away to go knight c5, like rook c5 to c3 to go knight c5 next. Bishop f4 coming after h6.
Grinding everything here. That pawn on h6, bishop g7. Okay, Greg's holding this together for the time being. John also has the possibility of potentially opening a second front, and a bit of an unconventional idea, but f3, then capturing. Wow, look at that. GF,
Unconventional,
opening the G file.
Unless you're John Bartholomew, because if you take back with the pawn on f3, then the king goes to f2, the rook comes to g. Ooh.
Oh, he's taking with the bishop. He wants g4. I thought about this, didn't like it as much.
Wait. Knight takes d4 is a threat, right? Knight takes d4. Oh, not anymore. Because knight d4 had a threat. If we just go back and if you play like
good point,
d4,
good catch.
Knight d4, you take on c8, I take on f3 intermezzo, and if you take my knight at bishop d4 check, and I give up my 2 pieces for rook and 2 pawns.
Rook h8 by Greg. He's kind of preemptively preparing for g4. The problem is now b4 might be possible.
Knight takes d4, Danya.
But is that bad though? Bishop takes, and bishop b3.
Yeah,
I feel like White's got that dark square dominance after bishop c5, knight e5.
I like what you're saying there. I mean, it's just true. The dark squares are totally under. Take with the bishop on c5. You have e5. This pawn e6 can't mobilize. I'm with you.
But I also know what you're saying. I mean, maybe it's worth changing up the course of the game. Now John can play even a4. That's pushing the luck a little bit. Then knight takes d4 is slightly better, but still, I just don't believe in it.
Right. And so knight takes d4 is still a threat. And maybe you wait until b5 happens. Right? If you go a4, b5, then I do. So knight e5 played.
Ooh, interesting.
Oh, that I'm not sure.
I'm not sure because bishop can come to c6. I don't like that at all. I don't know why he didn't play a4. Again, that expression, having said A, you have to say B. Just push that knight away from c6.
So now rook a to c8.
Oh.
Just start trying to trade rooks.
Well, but John is still not risking here. I think White is the only one who can still contend for an edge. But maybe White is much better. I don't know. Maybe he can still get a4, b5 in. Yeah, the more I look at this, the more I start liking what John's doing, actually.
I can't even explain rook h7. What does that move do? Please don't sit silently, man. I'm asking for your help.
I don't know. I'm searching frantically for a reason. Greg king d8. Maybe he's trying to involve that rook via the 7th rank. But
yeah, bishop e8.
The rook's tied down to that h6 pawn. That's what saddles, I wanted to say.
No,
I wanted to make a pun with saddlemen, but I can't.
You know, you're just talking in the night. You just don't know any saddleman music. So when I mention a song, you won't get it. It's okay. We'll move on.
That rings a bell. Talking in the Night. Is that a song by Saddlemen?
Yes, it is. In fact, it is. So is
I actually believe I know that song.
You
I understood a reference that you made, Robert. Do you understand the magnitude of this achievement?
I'm glad we are getting along better than we were before, but we were getting along even better when you stopped taking cracks in Saddlemen. So anyway, back here.
G4, threatened by John.
Hey, there we go. There we go, Danya.
Now we're on the same. We should talk more about chess.
Rook G1,
Rook G4.
See, it's funny because you want to keep your rook on the C file, but your rook's not infiltrating there. So Rook G1 allows you to play G4.
Bishop
Good
C2,
move.
stepping aside.
Knight
Obviously,
B6.
don't want to trade.
Play Knight B6. You need some sort of
you have
activity.
to seek active counterplay. You can't just let John run circles over you. But here, maybe takes in Bishop E8.
Right.
Peg yourself to that pawn on H5. That's the only source of counterplay at this moment. And he does it. Kudos to Greg. Rook G7 is possible here, sacking the pawn. John has made a bit of a hash with this. And he's got 10 seconds.
10 seconds.
This is a must-win game by Greg. He's got to try to overtake the initiative.
Oh, look at that move. Can you take
Takes an H5?
That's what I'm looking at, but then the pawn goes to G7. Oh, wait, but just take now. Oh,
this is winning chances for Black. Let me tell you, this is not a draw.
G7. Bring your king to C6.
And those light squares on the queen side all of a sudden cost White. Can Black penetrate?
You got to get the knight around. So take on E4.
Take it.
And then play A5. Maybe.
That's a nice idea.
But I like this. You can't take on D5 yet, so he gains a move.
Okay, but Bishop H6. Oh, no.
Then knight E2 check. You always have knight E2 check.
King D3, I guess, there.
Right,
okay, now he centralizes his knight. He's got to try to find
Knight B6. Knight B6.
Seconds.
Knight B6. Oh, not B5.
That would have induced a huge weakness on B5. Good catch.
B5.
Greg missing his chances, but maybe he's trying to checkmate White. No, he can't do that either. Oh, man. Oh, man.
We're going to have to go back as, you know, the next game starts. All right. Now,
Greg's taking these draws too quickly. I mean, I feel like he didn't really search for anything there.
We're going to pull up the analysis board because at that moment he played B5. He had the right idea to come after the pawn on A4, but if he had played knight B6, now the pawn on A4 is really under attack. And so you play A5, I move my knight away, and eventually I'm trying to get my king to B5 because once I start gaining space, knight D7, then king B5. I mean, I'm just picking up squares. It's not that it's game over and nothing of the sort, but that's the type of maneuver you need to win a position where you have a knight that can go from the light square, the dark squares, and your opponent has a bishop that must stay protecting your pawn. So we have another Caro-Kann defense. Still no Scandinavian. All of the Team Scandi fans, you're going to be disappointed until we get to the bullet portion, where I'm sure JB will play at least one Scandi to make the people happy. But right now, we still like White's position, 2 bishops, good center, and more
we have
space.
alerted the county sheriff of Minneapolis-St. Paul. If John does not play a Scandi, trouble awaits. Because we have to see that. I mean, and the problem, and again, I'm backseat driving this a little bit, but I don't like Greg's opening choice. He has to win 2 games. I feel like if he doesn't win, and they probably only have time for 2 games, maybe 3, but if he doesn't limit this to at the very least, a 3-point advantage, John is an incredibly strong bullet player. I just don't see Greg making a huge comeback of a 5-point magnitude in the bullet section.
Oh, I mean, John's the favorite in the bullet too. I don't think that can be disputed, but with that 1 second increment, it gives the lower rated players some more chances, and Greg is not as strong, not as highly rated in bullet. But what I do like about this game for Greg is he is well ahead in the clock.
Yep.
What I don't like is that he keeps playing these lines where his bishop on F1, which you'd like to claim it's a good piece, it struggles for a diagonal. We keep talking about these pincers on B7, C6, and F7, E6, just limiting the scope of a light square bishop. It goes to G2. Then what? Are you going to play C4? No, you're not, because the D4 pawn becomes weak. And Queen A3, just infiltrating. So do I have to play C4 now? I really didn't want to.
I would. I mean, I actually think it's not such a bad idea, though, because you could also try to whip something together on the king side. For example, if knight F6, but I think John's going to play knight E7. That retains the flexibility of later on jumping to F5 and attacking that D4 pawn, which is what he does. Queen C3. Okay, I was thinking more in the direction of H5 and doing something on the king side, but it's so hard. Black's position is so incredibly solid here. Maybe he's trying to trap the queen. B6, C5, something along those lines.
Well, the queen has the B4 square for black. But that's actually a very risky move to play, because once I trade on B4 and white pushes A5, there's rook A1, your B4 pawn is weak. If I ever play A6 and try to undermine the defense of the C6 pawn. So you can't just rely on the square. I know I have B4, but you can't just say, I have that square, so I'm safe. No, that trade can actually cost you a lot. So if I'm John here, I'm thinking of, do I play knight F5, as you said earlier? Do I play B6 as black? Do I play even eventually a C5 type of move? Well, I can't, because B7's hanging, at least I don't think I can, but these type of moves are what come to mind.
Yeah, and this is why this type of bunker chess is so hard to play in Blitz, because if white plays this correctly, if white doesn't get impatient, black starts worrying about all of these pawn advances, all these breakthroughs, and that necessarily forces you to spend a lot of time. We see a big time disparity here. I think Greg should have done this earlier. He seems more confident. He seems more loose in these few games. This is a must-win situation, though. He's better. He goes for C5. We've seen this before. It backfired the last time he did it. This time he follows it up with B4. I like it. Interesting idea.
He's trying to spring free an A pawn, because you split the board in half. You look at the pawn advantages. Black has 4 pawns to 3 on the E through H files. White has an extra pawn on the queen side. But you want to make it pass pawn, and if you can get an A pawn rolling, that will distract black's pieces. And this knight on E7 already kind of a passive piece, but it may just jump into D5 in the very near future.
Rook C1, Greg keeping the attention, but B5, he allows B5. I'm not sure that was a good idea. Oh, man. Man.
Well, the point was after A takes B5, Rook takes B5, and then you plant that knight on D5 at any moment, take over the queen side. And
now how do you make progress? Black sticks a rook on A6, blockades it with a double on A8. What does white even do here? White is the one saddled with that pawn on A5 now.
You're so proud of yourself for making that saddled.
Again, saddled, yeah. I think I'm the first person who's used the word saddled twice in a commentary.
The bishop on E4,
something I should be proud of.
The bishop on E4 is a good piece because it keeps the knight limited. And there it goes away. But
I would try to prepare G4. I mean, Greg cannot afford to draw this game, but now knight F5. White starts getting overextended. That pawn on D4 all of a sudden becomes a huge weakness as well. Knight F5, oh no.
No, the A5 pawn also was hanging, so knight F5 just...
White's position starts to crumble at the seams here.
Oh, knight D4, you can't move your bishop back to knight E2 check. He just goes queen D4.
Queen C7 maybe as a last ditch, but then queen takes C5.
No, this is bad.
John is just such a solid player. He never shoots himself in the foot. And we see him pouncing on one chance after another.
Yeah, queen g5, threatening bishop takes h5, just trying to go for some sort of cheapo attack. Wait,
Time is a little bit concerning for John,
wait,
but it's
then
an easy
that's
position
also
to play.
concerning.
But queen g4, knight h6 maybe.
The queen f4.
Ah,
Queen g4 to king h7.
or queen f6. There's just no threats. That bishop's trapped. Nice move.
Right.
Oh,
And if you
that's
have
a
to
very
trade
unpleasant
queens here,
dilemma.
you're bishop f3.
knight d4. And
But that may have been the best way to trade queens because you could play king g2, g4, rook h3, rook h1.
definitely.
G4. I play g4 so quickly.
Yeah,
Right.
f4 is not the right direction though.
Yeah, you
No
need
g4.
but then rook t-
No,
sorry,
now
pawn
he gives
f4.
that pawn. Oh, and it's over.
Rook c3, knight e2 check.
Yep.
okay.
Rook a1 here trades a pair of rooks or this.
Yeah, this is all JB in this match right now.
Yep.
Cannot be stopped. Rook
And
c3.
this is such a JB positional dominance kind of game. I've played so many of these games where one of my hacky attacks backfires and John just steamrolls me with a pair of pass pawns. And look at that knight on d4, holding everything together, total dominance.
It's a knight that was questionable earlier in the game, but now that it's found its dark square, the light square bishop cannot compete with it. And he goes rook a3 attack.
That's a
bishop.
devastating loss for Greg.
It is. And
Any
he's-
momentum he had built with that one win, now gone.
He also has so much time. Like it feels like he could have
He
spent a
does.
little more throughout this game.
Yeah, he had a hard time, I think, finding the zen in terms of time management. We saw him get into time pressure at first, then maybe tilts started coming into play. Okay, he had one last chance there with g6, but John, having none of it, this is over.
Yeah, g6 threatens nothing. You just start trading pawns here, and here comes c2. And
f6, no.
we're trying to get f6, g7, rook
Rook
h1.
h1, bishop h7, checkmate.
Yeah, you're trying to deliver that kind of mate. That's pretty funny.
Yeah,
Too slow, though.
way too slow. Greg's searching desperately, but he no longer has any use for those 30 seconds.
He does not. Indeed, you're correct. And that means that JB is about to go up 6 points here. And JB looks like he's at 0-0.
Yeah, and if I'm going to tell you, if he was down 6 points, he would look exactly the same. Literally indistinguishable.
Oh, man. He's just so funny. He just keeps the same exact expression.
He really does. It's actually unbelievable.
He's the man who can't be moved. Do you think when he watches movies, he gets emotional? Like when he watched Toy Story, do you think he may have reacted a little bit with a little like, or like
Yeah,
anything?
I don't know. I can't see it happening, Robert, to be honest with you. I just can't see it. I feel like John is just a consummate professional in every aspect of life.
And where, Chase Quake says, JB cool as the other side of the pillow, using a nice Stuart Scott reference there. And, he gets another victory. He's up 6 points now. And we're being told on his videos and streams, he's super expressive, though. Yeah, he is.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. He's raging and schmaging.
He's very expressive. Like, oh, and this was a cool idea. And then you just get to hear that little exclamation point in his voice. And we have a Cambridge Springs. So Teddy Coleman's going to be happy to see this because he played this a few times with Alina Kashinskaya.
Oh, there we go. The tilting of the cup, the sipping of the coffee. The only thing he tilts is his cup full of coffee to tilt it toward his mouse.
But is
his mouth.
he putting the pinky up yet?
No, right. The pinky, the two fingers up when you're drinking. I remember that from the last match.
And
It's quite possibly the last game of the 3-minute portion, barring a quick result.
Man. I'm looking at this board here. Looks good for white again. JB's up 6 points. I don't know what else to say.
I don't know. It's just one of those things where bit by bit, the match gets out of control. I'm not sure about E4. I feel like that might have been a little bit premature, but still very comfortable, pleasant position for John.
6 points. There's no way he loses 6 games in bullet, right?
I can't see it happening. John is probably among the players in this field, one of the strongest bullet players, and he's just as solid in bullet as he is in the other time controls. It's not like he goes crazy. His time management is good. He's fast. I can't see it happening.
He's also been drinking a lot more water than I'm used to because we only see the coffee mug typically, but I've seen that tall glass of water.
I have to interrupt. It's so funny. We scratched the back of our neck at the exact same time. I was looking at the stream.
Yeah.
I did not choreograph that. I don't know if anybody else saw that.
I didn't see it. I was paying attention to the chess and to my comments about.
Is that so? Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Ooh.
There's. Oh no, never mind.
What were you gonna say?
I had some crazy ideas there with putting the bishop on c4 and following up with bishop g6. But really, when you're up 6, there's absolutely no excuse for doing anything crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this position here. White has such good control over the center. The one downside I would say is that it's not clear how to make progress. So if you can get a blockade for black, bishop e6 to start with, you're not really threatening to take on b6 ever. So bishop a5 is a pin that doesn't actually threaten much. So bishop e6, queen d7, I just play in that manner.
Yeah, that square is a pretty big deal. And I would definitely jettison the pawn at some point, just allow bishop b6 and rook b6, also because the a file opens and that a2 pawn is going to be very weak. Most of the time, you're not even going to be sacking the pawn because if the bishop is on e6, as you point out, Robert, rook takes a2 is always going to be possible.
Exactly. So Greg thinking for a while before playing bishop e6, but that 38-second think there, it's one that you knew he was thinking about bishop e6 from the start, and you can just tell he's a lack of confidence at the moment. Queen d7. So he plays the exact idea we were talking about. You can't take on b6. Thanks to Bridgeport Mitch for that 100 bit cheer there. Appreciate it. And glad you're enjoying the channel. And I guess you're from Bridgeport, Connecticut, judging by your username, but maybe I'm wrong. And bishop d3 by JB.
Right.
So what's this idea?
I guess just bishop d2, he's trying to rein everything in. Maybe he wants some potential rook lifts with the rook e1, rook e4, rook h4. Because, okay, Greg's slowly preparing c5, but c5 immediately is not possible because of bishop b5. Don't play c5. Maybe, okay, that's an annoying move. Because if rook c7, White can try to soften him up with bishop a5.
Right.
And then just come back to d2.
I actually would have played b5, b4, I think, for black.
Definitely agree.
Put my pawn on b4, then try to go c5 and play more aggressively. But rook c7, rook c8, so bishop a5. Now b6 comes, and c5
bishop
is
e1.
possible because there's no skewer, right? There's no rook on e8.
Bishop a6 and bishop e5, though, this is a double-sided sword because there's that x-ray going on. The rook on d1 and the queen on d7. There's a little kebab of pieces on the d file, but if you move the onions away, you might be left with the meat. So that's what John is doing.
There's a kebab and no skewer. So what's your point?
Man, this is too meta of a reference. I have some kebabs in my freezer. I don't know why I just made myself hungry.
I'm just really hungry. I have not eaten dinner. I thought that this match would be a nice snack, but now it's getting one-sided, and so I'm just getting hungry.
Me too.
Okay.
Are there any places open late in New York at this hour? Because in Charlotte, like everything after 10 p.m., everything that says it's open till 2, everything is closed. It's a terrible fate.
Some of us cook, so.
Oh, I cook. I have the best DiGiorno pizza in town.
Oh my gosh. It's not delivery. It's
DiGiorno.
All right. So bishop c5, closing the c file. I mean, I do like black's position. It feels like black's pieces are more coordinated, but is White just go ahead and take on e6, take the 2 bishops, and claim the king on h8 isn't too safe?
But I still don't like John's position. That bishop on c5 is making me nervous. Queen g4 here, for example. That attack could come out of nowhere. Queen g4, knight f4. We all know the knight and queen tandem is incredibly powerful. Greg's got to move, though. You can just sense he's not confident in his ideas. Queen g4 is a move I would make in 3 seconds.
But queen g4, the queen d2, perhaps, just pinning that knight to the rook. Then bishop d4, actually.
Bishop d4, but still, queen e7, okay, that's sensible as well. That queen aiming for g5. He's just freeing up his knight. That's the key idea here.
So knight f4 comes to tempo, but then queen f3 hits the knight on f4, hits the pawn on f7 behind it. And black's king is not exactly very safe.
Queen
because
g5,
if I
that's true.
Oh, queen rook d4 here?
Also queen g5. No, knight g6 is definitely not the way. Now e6.
E6. But that pawn's pinned, so knight f8.
Okay, but still, I feel like queen g5 created that threat against the undefended c1 rook.
Oh, good call.
Knight f8 is a great move, though. Knight f8 is a great move.
Of time here. He doesn't want to move the
way
knight.
too much time. Look at his clock, 5 seconds.
He was going for the rook, and now he takes here. Now knight f4 comes in. So your idea at long last.
But G3 stabilizes the situation. Knight F4 now. That looks devastating.
But there's G3 here because the
He's
bishop on E6.
holding things together.
Rook
Oh,
D4, then Queen A8 check. You gotta watch out for back.
oh,
break.
John. And Greg's got 2 seconds. Queen G3.
Yeah, that's a
Bishop
Bishop
D3 wins the
D3.
piece.
oh, missed by both. And-
So,
okay, so what a 1964, it's a free piece.
oh my God.
Wow,
John
don't blow
wanted
a
a
checkmate.
Look at
Oh, he lost on time.
Oh,
No,
my
he
God.
won a piece, but he lost the game on time.
Oh my
I can't
God.
take it anymore.
I
I'm
can't
freaking out.
believe it.
No.
Oh,
no.
my God.
He just won a free piece. And
John
he
has shaking his head with that smile. He feels bad, but that is the story of the match right then and there.
Oh, well, Greg Shahade, he just can do nothing but laugh at his own demise in this match. And we will take a quick breather because my heart aches for Greg. And when we return, we will see the bullet portion of this match. John Bartholomew up so many points that it feels like it's already his match to win. We'll see if that's the case when we return in just a few minutes as I Am Not a GM Speed Chess Championship match brought to you by Chess.com. And as we return, the question on everyone's mind that I have, in fact, asked the chat is, Danya, how many Scandies are we about to see in the Bullet Portrait?
I think we're going to see, I just feel like John is not in a Scandi frame of mind today. I think we're going to see one just so he keeps, this country from entering a revolution. But I feel like he's going to go by the if it ain't broke, don't fix it mindset, and he's going to keep playing Caro. So I think we're going to see a Scandi in the first game that Greg plays E4. And then I'm sad to report, but I don't think he's going to keep playing the Scandi. That's just my take.
And the problem
I
is,
hate to be the bearer of bad tidings, of course.
Well, John doesn't play E4 because then Greg would play the Scandi against him and show him who's boss, or try to, I should say. But yeah, he's going to let the whole region down. Zlatan Ibrahimovic will never forgive him. Magnus Carlsen will no longer associate with John Bartholomew, even though Magnus Carlsen himself has used the Scandi. He beat Fabiano Caruana in the Tromsø Olympiad and then drew him in another game with the Scandi. So if Magnus Carlsen can do it against Fabiano Caruana, there's no excuse for John Bartholomew.
Shall we say this will be scandalous?
Oh my gosh, I liked you so much more while we were on break. What happened, Danya? What did you do? Let's get these games going.
I don't perform under pressure. Let's get them going because we want the mystery to be resolved. I think we can agree on that. And here we go. B3. No.
He played D5 in the first move, so it's kind of like a Scandi.
I don't think that qualifies. Greg, how could you?
Oh, that is disappointing. So now we get the B3 systems. It's going to take a while because Greg needs to win every single game, right?
He does. I mean, and he needs to start quickly. There is technically enough time. Let's be clear about that. There is enough time, but if he loses even one more game, the match is over. And here he allows A4. This is a structure that I've played against John because I play B3 pretty often against him.
Yep.
John is really good in these structures.
Okay, watch out for knight takes G3, by the way. The queen on A7 pins the pawn F2. So you would like to play B4 and keep the queen side closed, but then okay, taking that way. So now B4 is possible.
Yeah, A3 cementing that pawn structure. The pawn on B4 is a little bit weak. Yeah, this is very double-edged. Greg certainly shouldn't trade the queens.
Knight F5. Plays rook B3. Yep. And so would you play G4, kick that knight?
Yeah, I would actually go for kingside play here. Just go for the throw. G4, knight G5, and then sack something on E6.
I don't
like that idea.
G4, H4, H5, just push everything.
Yeah, I wouldn't play on the queen side. The problem is if you ever play B5, Black can leap into C5 with his other knight. And here we already see John reaping the rewards. Greg's rooks just don't look like they carry a lot of strength doubled up on the closed B file like that.
Although, what about some kind of knight H2, knight G4 sort of maneuver? Especially now that B7's hanging. Knight H2 is like a double
I like
attack.
it, opening up that bishop. The problem is there's knight D4. Knight D4, yeah.
But then...
Exactly.
Yeah. I got nothing for you. Knight D4 just traps.
Knight D4 is just very strong.
The bishop takes B7. And
yeah,
knight to check.
Knight 2!
Knight 2! I was just saying. Oh, they both miss it. It hurts
Still
so
winning.
much.
Still winning, though.
It hurts. They both missed the fork with me, too.
Oh, my God. And Greg, I think he was taking a deep breath, but it's still bad. Rook B5, though. Yep. Let me tell you, Robert, Rook takes C5 and knight E4 ideas, potentially. Queen F6 coming in.
Oh, yeah. This is heating up here. And it's actually very important that the king has the H2 square to escape to. Because now that there's a check, it's one check, good for you. Or take the queen, take a C5. But that's actually an interesting choice.
Rook D2. Okay, very practical.
Wow. John he's a sneaky guy.
Rook takes F2 is also in the mix.
Can you get Rook C7 and take on F7?
Oh, he's trying to take on E6, but
look at that. He took on F7 with check.
Rook F2 and Rook B2. This doesn't look good.
Oh, whoa.
What is that?
He's going to set with check. That's a bad move for sure.
G8. What is he doing? C6.
Oh, and he blunders his rook.
What is he doing?
He loses the rook and he loses the game with it.
He just blew it right there. And it's actually checkmate after King D8 there. John trying to prolong the game, obviously.
Oh, yeah, 96 Rook F8 was made. Good call.
What is that? Rook D2? Come on, Greg. He's got to get on with this. He cannot waste a single second.
And Rook anywhere on the 7th rank with checkmate next move. Rook anywhere. Anyone?
Oh my goodness!
Checkmate in one.
I cannot believe it. There's clearly no squares for the king. He lets John milk the clock a little bit further.
Wait, John Bazan, what a gentleman! What a gentleman!
He is a gentleman. He didn't have to.
Maybe not so scholarly in this instance, but gentlemanly for sure.
Greg with another fist bump.
Yeah.
Now, let me tell you, if he wins one more, it's still a 6-point game. I thought it was a 6-point game to start, but it was a 7.
No. And Danya, that wasn't a fist bump. That was a CrossFit exercise.
Oh, well, I wouldn't know, would I?
I mean, nor would I, but I see Greg posting it all the time. So. All right,
Oh,
another
man.
one of these queen trade positions where white is slightly better. The C file.
I'm sorry, Robert, but Greg, why is he going for this endgame?
Don't ask me, man. I asked you the questions that neither of us know the answer to. It is. You've learned. Finally, we're only in the last semifinal of this event, heading towards the finals, and you finally have learned.
Well, better late than never, as they say. Now E4 is possible. John's got that crunch in the center. F4, E5.
I like that way. I rarely compliment you, but got that crunch in the center. That's a really well phrased description of this position.
Thank you. Well, there was a very high level pun contained in that, but you wouldn't recognize it. Okay. Crunch, Jim.
No, I now understood what you were saying after you said there was some high level thing, but it was actually so ridiculous and unnecessary that I just, Wait, is there going to be a mate on the G file? Rook F4,
there might be Rook F4, Rook G4. You know what's interesting? Rook F4, H5, Rook F5. But John going straight for the throat. Rook H5, Rook H6, and Bishop H7.
Nope.
Or
he goes
this.
back. Rook F8.
E5. Okay.
Yeah. That way you.
Oh my God! Bishop H7 mates.
Oh Lord!
What a devil!
Oh my gosh! And JB finds it.
Oh, and that king's subjected to a workout at LA Fitness right there. Rook G8 mate.
That king wishes it could escape to the West Coast because
Bishop G7 checkmate in 1.
That's so sick.
Mate in 1. He sees
oh
it.
My gosh!
What a devilish sequence by John.
Woo!
All of a sudden, in an end game, he checkmates him in like 5 moves.
Hey, the traditionalists would be mad at you for saying an end game because when there's 2 rooks in the minor pieces, that's a queenless middle game.
Oh, my sincere apologies to the traditionalists.
I've been threatened by viewers that they would stop watching my commentary if I called positions of the end games. I was like, really? It's like, a minor point here, but I've taken it to heart.
Okay.
I've learned. Oh,
man.
Again. Why are we not getting a Scandi?
I don't know. This is ridiculous. There's nothing on the line anymore. It's clear that John will win this match. I mean, I think it's safe to say. That doesn't mean anybody should go anywhere, but I mean, 7 points in 19 minutes. Tracy McGrady made a bigger comeback against the Spurs.
I was about to say it, so I'm glad you said it.
Did you actually? Were you about to mention that?
I was 100% about to say that.
Oh my goodness, man! Robert,
13
I think
points
we're
in
getting
33
better.
seconds. There's also Reggie Miller against my beloved.
Right,
Knicks.
the 3-pointers.
Don't bring that up in my presence. I can bring it up. You can't. But the Tracy McGrady one was a good call.
The thing is, Robert, I don't even need to think because the Knicks have lost so many games and they've won so few that I can mention any team against the Knicks and chances are they've made a big comeback against them at some point.
You're not wrong. That's what hurts the most.
But don't touch the Warriors, though. That is sacrosanct. And John is just, he is
scooping up,
ripping him apart here in this structure.
Scooping up pawns and...
Okay, that's Queen A4. Greg is a little tilted, I think.
So what's the material? A queen and a pawn for a rook and a bishop. That's not enough. And knight takes G3 after rook F1 is just lights out. Knight takes G3, and the pawn is pinned.
Oh my goodness, that is a massacre right there. Knight F1 even. It's practical play by John.
Man.
All right, guys, doing pretty well so far, but let's not relax prematurely. Just take another refill of my espresso at Starbucks, guys. All right, guys.
Look, that was a smile. I saw a smile.
You saw a smile sighting?
I did see a smile.
Bartholomew smile sighting.
I mean, that's it. My job as a commentator is done. I have seen John Bartholomew smile, so thank you, everybody. No, I'm just kidding. We still got
Robert, and it's a relief. I finally get to commentate on my own, as I've always desired to. See you later, Robert. Good job.
I'm glad that you're honest with me. That's the first step to having a good, commentating partnership is that you're honest, that you want to kick me out. It's fine. I see how it is, Danya. I thought that I provided at least a smidgen of entertainment value and some quality analysis here and there.
But a smidgen is about right.
Okay. We're on the same page. See that? We're back on the same page. This rook on D3, queen on D1 configuration leaves quite a bit to be desired. And queen E4, that's a nice move. Bishop G2, though. Watch out.
Bringing the bishop back. Notice bishop takes D5. There's knight H4.
Yep. So what can you do instead? Queen B4?
Yeah, now that queen is rookie. I like how Greg is handling this. The problem is if John plays E4 and knight C4, things could go sour very quickly here for John. Even the A3 is an idea here because queen takes A3. There's knight C4.
Ooh, that's nice.
It was knight C4 immediately.
Well, now there's no knight c4 because bishop a6 covers the square.
F4, E5 though.
F4, there's going to be some kind of knight takes d5.
Knight G4, Oh, cool.
I would play rook e7 back. Just like preemptively, like please play f4. Oh, getting active though.
Okay, Greg's getting work done here.
Queen c3, take, knight takes d5. The pawn is pinned.
How about knight b1 and knight c3? That's I don't like rook e7 there though.
Agreed. He's trying to just pin. If you take on c4, rook c7, rook c8 kind of stuff, pinning down the c line.
Yeah, and John taking his sweet time here. Yeah, this is definitely from a practical perspective harder to play for white because and brave Bartholomew. Rook c7 and maybe double rooks and wins the knight. But okay.
Rook c7 is rook b3, I guess. Whoa.
No, but I mean white is clearly winning there. No, but I don't know what this Robert Hess is saying. I mean, together with Ding Liren, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Oh my gosh, that is awesome. So awesome.
And he transfers his rook to c7. Can you save that bishop on c4?
The answer is no, but I'll say yes just to make you feel better about it. Rook c8. Knight takes d5.
Okay.
Even.
Oh, just take on c4. Is there's nothing going on the e file because that knight's defending the square.
Rook takes c4.
Takes c4 just wins.
Yeah, you have d7 under your control because the knight covering the square, so there's no d7, and you're up a piece.
But Greg, I'm sorry to say, but when you're not trusting yourself, even simple conversions can become difficult, speaking from experience.
It's true. You're getting frustrated. You're saying every single game I'm going to lose. I have been losing. And
that's a good move, though. F5.
5.
Nicely done by Greg.
Queen
Very
G6.
clean.
Rook takes e6. Your knight's under attack.
Okay, queen c6. Okay, that loses.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, man, John losing the house here.
And f2 check coming if you don't trade queens.
My. Let's see another smile from Mr. Bartholomew here.
No more smiles. He's all serious at this point.
And nothing, no reaction, not a nod, not a head shake, not a smile, literally expressionless.
And when are we going to get a Scandi?
Well, Greg, the ball is in Greg's court right now. He's the one playing 1b3 and chickening out.
This is extremely
Robert, you know what's unacceptable is in the interviews he was talking up a storm about the Scandinavian would be named the Shahade. I mean, he was talking. Now when he has a chance to play e4, he doesn't even let John play an opening, which he's clearly refuted. That's
going to be our first question when we get to the interviews, is about why Greg did not play e4 and allow a Scandinavian, because he did talk a big game. And then when it came down to the bullet where he was saying it's the only time he would play the Scandi himself, there's been no Scandi because
you know what yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm saying, you know what they say, he who laughs last laughs longest. And John may be talking less during the interviews, but he's letting his move do the talking here.
This is very true. And for Greg, I have to wonder what's going on. Why no Scandi? Maybe because he's losing the match. He doesn't also want to lose in the Scandi, so that way it's adding insult to injury. But I want to see some Scandi. That knight on d4 is a beautiful piece.
It is. And John, again, with those knights on the outpost, defended by the pawn on t5. Even though it's not protected by a pawn, you still can't reach that knight. And look at this domination, doubling on the a file, crashing through once again in the structure.
It's easy to play. And you pointed out the knight on d4, safe there, can't be attacked. The only way is if you go king e1, king d2, king e3, but in that time. Okay, do I take on a2 and then go knight e2 check or something?
I would, just king f6, biding the time, because white has no way to apply pressure on but now it takes a knight e2, knight takes f4.
No, it was mate. Oh, wait, rook a3. I was going to knight e2, rook h8 mate.
Could that have been a mouse loop? No.
Maybe he just wanted
rook b7 though, Robert. That was some ideas, I guess, but then knight e2.
Rook d1 was going for mate. He's still going for mate.
Yeah, he is. Oh, knight e2.
Knight e2.
Oh, another fork, and this time John doesn't miss it. Rook d1 mate. Oh, crushing.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
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 4 times. Wow, that's a new one.
What is there even to say here?
I mean, it's one of those things that we always talk about this, Robert. Now, some of these lopsided matches, it's easy to think that, from the very start, it was just one win after another. But these things take place gradually. First, you show a little sign of weakness. remember those first 2 games when Greg had 2 chances to win, didn't capitalize?
Yep.
I just feel like that created that shadow in his mind over the whole match. And he just wasn't quite the same in terms of confidence, in terms of crispness, in terms of sharpness. And John, on the other hand, he got better and better as the match went on, like some bottle of fine wine.
Yeah, John has been great. And let me ask you, Danya, we'll talk about this more in depth in a bit, but now that we know John Bartholomew is moving on to the final, taking on Alina Kashlinskaya, right? That's
Thank
how
you,
it is.
Kashlinska.
I see. I changed it because I remembered you kind of scolding me.
Thank you, Robert. Well, I appreciate that you take my comments to heart. That means a lot to me. You've earned yourself one more commentary with me.
Well, I'm glad that the next one is the final. Queen F2.
Oh
Rook
my
takes
goodness,
E2.
Greg, Rook takes E2 doing short work there. And Queen takes F1 is going to be, oh no, that's not possible though. Queen
Not
G6,
yet.
how do you win?
Wait, that would be ridiculous if all of a sudden it's white winning. Queen.
No,
G6.
it can't be. I mean, there's no threats and Greg could worst comes to worst. Okay, but where is the win?
Queen F6, Rook H3, then Queen F1. That would be sick.
Oh, nice, distracting.
Yeah,
Get out of there. Yeah, that's right.
Because Rook H3 is tempting here, right? To just get discoveries. But then you play Rook H3 and then Queen takes F1.
The switchback. But what if white takes and then goes Rook H3?
Yeah, that doesn't.
And man, there's some bishop discoveries, and both rooks are in a light square. Both rooks are in a light square. Oh
man.
Oh, John.
Rook H3.
Rook H3, John.
Oh, John. Man.
Hey, got John.
Hey,
oh, man. What did I do? Man. Oh, my God.
Oh, gosh. And now it looks like black should be much better because of the activity.
But with John, he's so resilient. Rook E1. It's not that clear. Bishop takes D5 is not so clear because of Rook E5.
Rook H3, King G8. Okay, you can escape for now.
Bishop takes D5 now, though. Got to be winning, yeah. Knight E3.
Oh.
I can't believe how long John is surviving. It's like every time Greg makes a move, now it's winning. And John finds a resource.
Knight D3 perhaps is the only option. I don't want to see any other moves here.
I don't either. He's got to do it.
And there it is.
Oh, but takes F5, Rook H3, and Knight E7.
Oh, picking up material. Nasty. Rook H3, Knight E7, fork down.
Oh, John.
Oh, John.
I feel like John is he's taking the foot off the gas pedal, but deservedly so.
I feel like there's almost a checkmate there with Knight D3 to Knight
This
F3.
is still not clear. It's amazing. Chess is a draw, Robert.
C6 instead of Bishop E6 gave black some chances to try to win that game, but
let's just say we've seen higher quality bullet games.
We've also seen Rook and Pawn beat Rook and Pawn. So
that is true. This game is full of fight. King G5, King F6.
Oh no.
Bishop G6.
Please no.
Don't lose this, Greg. Rook C8. Okay.
Hard to lose this one.
There's just no way to make progress for white.
Well, don't blunder Rook H2 check.
Okay. Rook G2.
Okay. Bishop G6 there was.
I would make 20 moves here, but
I would make 50 moves. And that wasn't me one-upping you. That was just me talking about the time.
No, you never one-up me. I didn't interpret it that way.
I actually 30-upped you if you want to count. So.
Oh, 2050. Wow. That's very witty, Robert. I might take that under consideration, plagiarize that in the future.
Mm-hmm. Good for you. And what's going on? We're just repeating moves, shuffling.
Or making a draw, I think.
Yeah.
Are
we making a draw, though? You and I? We're going to make a draw?
Yeah, we always make draws because we're best of friends. Actually, have we had a decisive game, Robert? I think we've played. Oh, yeah, we have. Berkeley.
Yeah, you cried after the game.
Did I actually cry?
No, but I
might have. I mean, I was young.
No, I love how I said it and you believed me. And I felt bad that I said it because you're like, oh, wait a second, this could be true. And now I feel like a bad person. So,
well, you already know you are. So that's nothing new under the sun, as they say.
I'm pretty sure they don't say that. So
I think I remember the last time I cried after a game. I think it was World Youth under 18. Yeah. And I'm not ashamed to say this because everybody knows I put a lot of passion into the games. I was playing David Anton Guijarro, Spanish Grandmaster. Now he's, I think, over 2,700.
Yeah, just about. Yep.
And I was already a GM. And if I won, I would contend for second place. If I drew, I think it was guaranteed third. And I did that thing for the only time in my chess career where I played the second move of a variation rather than the first. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was playing an inspired game. I sacked a queen. Everything was going great. And at some point, I just had this mental snafu. And yeah, I definitely shed some tears after that one. But
For the first time in my life, I feel like I want to give you a hug, but
well,
yeah.
Everybody gets better with age, Robert.
I put my arms in the hug motion, so you were supposed to just fall right in there.
Yeah. Okay. I'll cooperate. I'll cooperate.
That's a little heartbreaking. I'm not gonna lie to you. That pulls at the heartstrings here.
The last rounds are the worst. The ones where you lose the last round, that is the most crushing feeling.
Oh man, that hurts. I honestly liked it much more when we had the banter going on. We pretended like we didn't like each other. Now I'm hearing sad stories about you crying after I opened the door with a joke about you crying, which didn't actually happen. But you believe me, and that says something.
I got all sentimental. I always believe you, Well, except when I don't believe you, which is most of the time. And by the way, I think John is not believing a thing Greg is doing because he's about to win another game.
Yes, he's up a piece, and well, he pushed him, baby, and that resulted in winning material.
And he's still got some winning to do here, but 5 minutes left in the match. Probably time for 2 more games after this one.
Can we get a Scandi? John should play e4. Out of respect.
I know. He should take matters into his own hands.
Yes. I'm very upset about this. And
this is quite a shame. I might go back to doing politics, because I at first, I thought that John would play Scandi, and he's not playing it, so this is quite ridiculous.
I was asked for one more Kasparov, but that was my last one. No more.
Oh man, I wish we got a Scandi. I don't know what else to say here.
There isn't much else to say, and really, what do you think, looking back, was the pivotal moment when Greg, do you agree with my assessment that the first 2 games actually played an outsized role in determining the outcome of the match? Or do you think there was another moment that I'm missing?
No, I completely agree with you. And actually, after we saw the third game, when John converted his advantage, I was already sort of hinting to this. I was like, well, I don't want to call it, match over already, but when John converts a position where he's better and Greg had 2 huge advantages and was not able to get the full point, it already felt like this was a match that John was in better shape for. Mm-hmm. And the hot hand isn't real, so I don't want anybody to me, he had the hot hand today. But JB was just in better form when it came down to some of these critical moments. And even Greg offering that draw in the rook, bishop, and pawn,
completely agree.
Just goes to show that it wasn't Greg's day today.
Yeah, he just didn't trust himself. And sometimes, what is it? People might wonder, what does it mean to be in bad form? Or what does it mean when a very strong player is still in bad form? And oftentimes that just means you're not confident in your own moves. Something is wrong. Some neurons are misfiring and you just cannot quite believe in the strength of your own moves. You take more time. The effects of that can be very insidious, but they're still very real.
For sure. And I hadn't even looked at the board once, but now that I am looking at it, it's actually a pretty interesting position where I like Greg's chances.
I like, that pawn on a3, fixing the pawn on a2, and there we go, rook c2.
Time to infiltrate. It's the first time we've seen Greg actually have the pawn on a3. Usually it's JB doing that to Greg, but we finally get it.
And we do need a Scandi next game, or there will be revolution, Robert.
Also, Dunny, it's pretty interesting that we got to the semis. Teddy and now Greg both are losing very one-sided matchups. So what is it about JB and Alina? Just, it's clear that they deserve to be in the final.
Right.
What is it about their styles or about the way they play these matches that have allowed them to rook takes e4, rook e2?
Even rook h4 in the mix there. Ooh, that's a brave little move right there. But I guess queen takes queen and Greg's still at the upper seat. Well, to answer your question, I think there's a couple of things, right? First of all, it's important to mention John and Alina have different styles.
Yeah.
But what they share in common, and I've said this about 2 or 3 times, so I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but I do think this is very important. They almost never beat themselves. You can count on one hand the amount of games where they made a huge blunder or a string of games where they played well below their strength. They're so incredibly consistent. And it's not like they're necessarily better at calculation than everybody else, but they're so much more consistent. Their preparation is excellent. And Both of them have a very clearly defined strength. John is a positional monster, and I mean monster. His positional strength, I would say, is around 2,600. And Olina, of course, so sharp in tactics and so well prepared in the opening. We saw Queen B6 on Thursday, Olina's game in the first round game against Teddy. John has his own big strength. So these are consistent players, so hard to bring down. And it'll be a fascinating finale. I cannot wait for that.
And something else to note is that they seem to get these time advantages. And even if their position is a bit shaky, in that their opponent's time trouble, they're the ones making the most of those scrambles. So I think this one, okay, this one's over. It's great.
We have a final game.
It better be E4. E4, please, the final game.
Yes, D5.
Yes!
They stay
Yes!
themselves.
Team Scandi lives!
That's right. Man, by the skin of their teeth. And John with a thumbs up, Greg with the applause. Thank God. Thank everybody.
This is for the match. I don't care.
Put down your arms.
It is 0-0. It's all about this game here. It is Scandi time, and John finally cracks a smile. Let's see what's happening here.
And this is for the honor. They are playing for honor here.
Oh, man, I'm into this. Okay, so we see the position where white has the two bishops. We still have those pincers, right? B7, C6, F7, E6. But look at this setup with white. I love the bishops in the center, the bishop on D3 in particular. What do you do here as white? Do you go G4, G5, or Knight E4 as you just played?
I would go I mean, they have a very similar structure to the Caro-Kann games, actually basically identical. So, but it doesn't matter. The important thing is this came from a Scandi. Had this come from a Caro-Kann, our excitement wouldn't be comparable. I would go H4. That's fine. Greg should have done this, I think, earlier in the match. He had a couple of chances. G4. Go for it. Break it open. Break it open.
Oh,
Greg.
not
No.
G3.
Come on, G4.
Yeah, G4 was definitely the move there. You have to go for it.
Greg, C3. It's too timid. He's just too shy, too timid here. Still G4.
You know what this is? This is respecting the Scandi.
Which I never thought we would see. I mean, he's also doubling in the e-fold. This is not bad. Let me be clear.
G4?
As Obama would say, let me be clear. G4. You got to play G4.
Just play G4, break open. Bishop
Greg.
B7. Okay, I
Knight
no bishop
E5.
B7.
He's letting John do everything he wants. Blockade to D6 square.
And if you get F5 for black, all of a sudden it's yeah, here comes F5 for black. So
Greg.
no.
Greg,
Scandi.
Greg.
You know, I was ready to call this a 0-0 match and say the Scandi decides it, but now that this is happening, I don't want to. Oh, actually, bishop F4 pinning the knight. That's useful.
It's a good move, but look at John's position, so solid. Greg had so many chances to go G4. He's just not believing in himself, I think. And that's the theme of the match.
Right. And Queen E2 can be played just to go after the B5 pawn. He goes B4. What is that on that side of the board?
Yeah, look at that D3 square.
What about it?
Nothing. Just wanted to.
I'm looking at it, but white has.
I thought John would play C4, okay? But instead, he's just taking a free pawn, which I didn't notice.
Okay.
Satisfied?
No, but you told me to look at the D3 square, and I actually did. And I'm like, what am I looking at right now?
Well, I made you look at least.
You did. And now the pawn's on D6. And well, look at that bishop A2.
Okay.
Watch out. Queen B3.
Queen B3?
Oh, counter shot.
Okay.
Queen C4.
Yeah, that would take the air out of the position.
Wait a second. It's only one check. And he's saying, I'm actually going to break open your king. Now rook takes G3 check. Watch out for that.
Okay, but 8 seconds for Greg, and all of a sudden, Queen E5 comes in.
Oh, Queen E5, that's a good move.
Rook E2.
Just take something. Queen E4 check.
D6. Such a John thing to do.
It is the Johnest of John.
It is the most Johnest thing ever to take on the GF3 take there.
Wait, G4. Pull an Alina. Go G4, G5 mate. Hope for a free move.
B4 and then G4.
But the problem is...
Oh, look at John driving him into the corner in Queen G1. There's still Bishop D5, G4, G4. Greg's
F1.
trying to go Bishop, Queen F7. Okay.
E2, Queen D1. I'll play B3 here.
Oh, what a move. And Queen G4, Queen takes E8.
Queen takes Bishop.
Goodbye.
That's
Queen E3 check. Go Queen E3 check.
The Scandi. It's all about the Scandi right now.
Supreme. Stalemate ideas.
Yep.
F3.
Yeah, F3 is nice. That way Queen G2 is mate and
it ends with a checkmate.
Woo!
What a match.
Team Scandi moves on. We will take a quick break. When we return, we will have both players in for a post-match interview, but it was all Scandi all the way. We'll be right back with the IM GM Speeches Championship brought to you by Chess.com. Well, these two players gave the people what they wanted. So, Greg, we're going to start with you. Sorry the match did not go your way, but why did it take it to the last bullet game to allow a Scandi?
Before I go on, let me just say, I just want to get this out of the way. Nobody clipped this part. Like, can you turn off the clips?
Turned off. You've alerted Twitch.
John played a very good match. You might even say he outplayed me. It was really difficult to solve some of the problems he was setting in the 5 minute and the 3 minute. I felt like my positions were okay, and then I would just kind of like, he was very good at like complications, even low on time. So getting that out of the way, and it's going to be a really exciting final match between John and Alina. They both look like they're playing super well, but I'm the one who didn't allow the Scandi.
I mean, you're playing B3.
5 minute chess. E4, 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 E4. 3 minute chess. E4, E4. Every game, E4. Where's the Scandi?
Well,
I was saving my aim.
That's what people tuned in to see. They tuned in to see the Scandi. They were robbed of what they were here to see, and only because of my benevolence and generosity in the very final bullet game, I gave him a chance to play it.
Well,
yeah, I mean, I didn't.
Bartholomew. Comments?
Yeah, I didn't feel it necessary to use my A material in the 5+1/+1. So, I don't want to give away my preparation. I have another match with Alina, which is going to be extremely difficult, which I know a little bit about her style, but I got to keep some suspense. I did want to play it in the last game for the fans because, again, this is #Team Scandi. It's not just me. So I did want to, shout out to you guys in the Twitch and YouTube chat. Appreciate it. But in all seriousness, it was a great match. Greg is a fantastic practical player, I think. Like, the thing that stands out about him is he makes consistently good decisions, especially in the opening and early middle game. Knows his prep well, manages his time great. I think I was down on the clock in many of the 5+1 games in particular, but I was able to navigate the games to positions that played to my strengths, I think, and got a little sloppy in the bullet, but overall I'm happy with the match for sure.
Well, I have a question for both of you. Greg, I'll start with you. We felt like in the first couple of games in the 5 minute portion, you jumped out to an advantage out of the opening. You had some chances to win the game. Do you feel like that psychologically impacted your confidence, or was it more a case of just kind of not going your way over the board?
I don't think so. Honestly, I felt really confident because the first 2 games I got good positions. And I'm like, if I keep getting good positions, I can win this match. And then the 3rd game, he like out techniqued me, and then the 4th game, I felt okay. I was like, I wanted the points back, but I was confident enough at that point where I'm like, oh, this guy is nothing special. I'm going to get great positions every game. Eventually, I'll start winning some. But it didn't really happen. And can I just say, I've never lost a match by 9 points, and I had my opponent just talk as amazingly about how great I am. That was impressive.
They do say the best trash talk is when the person is being really nice.
Yeah.
No, but I'm not anything for the cameras. I just thought, time management wise, I think I have a ways to go. I think I'm inferior to Greg and Blitz in that department, but I can make up for it in other aspects.
You played very well.
Wow.
Thank you.
Well, you're such gentlemen. Well, John, hey guys, John, it's guys. The guys have a question for you. Exactly. Well, you weren't saying that too much in this match, but you mentioned that you are a bit familiar with Alina's style. That is a final that everyone is looking forward to. Without revealing any secrets from Bartholomew's kitchen, what can you tell us about Alina's style and how you're going to attempt to exploit some of the downsides in her style and in her play, if there are any?
Yeah, so in this tournament, I've been taking it match by match. I know that's a sports cliche or whatnot, but I was expecting to go far in this tournament. And on the other side of the bracket, after that match with Christoph, I gotta say, like, I didn't underestimate Alina, but I thought there was a good chance that Eric Rosen would take her out. But she's gotten stronger in this format, I think, as this tournament has gone along. And I think quite clearly she's the strongest classical player in the event. I think she's 2494 FIDE. I mean, very close to GM strength. Now, this format, it does play to other strengths too. So I like my chances. As far as what I'm expecting in terms of preparation, I guess that remains to be seen. I'm going to just enjoy this victory for a few days and then get down to business.
Man. Good response.
I mean, Greg, I don't even know what to ask you right now because John is he's just such a kind guy. Like, does that make you want to root for him in the finals, or are you going to root for Alina?
No, it's all a trick. He's not. You hear what he said about his A game?
Yeah, that was awesome. That was a great part.
Let's not make him out to be a saint just yet.
well, Saints have to die first, right? So, who do you have? You like to make odds. Who do you have as the favorite in the final between John and Alina?
John, very strong player. But I have to root for her. I'm sorry.
Oh,
and
man.
I hope there's a Scandi, and I hope she crushes it.
Well,
John's fire.
I do want to offer another olive branch, so it's very possible I'll be coming out with another course on the Scandi. I am the co-founder of Chessable. Check us out. And Greg, you will be the first one to get a free copy. I just want to say. And I know you already patronized our site. We appreciate it, but I'm going to get you a free copy.
Oh man, that is such a kind gesture. See, that is the type of kind insult that hurts way more than any foul mouth saying could impart. But John,
how do you delete courses that you get on that site?
Man,
John, I did want to ask you something because Greg did have two almost winning positions in the first two games. I mean, the first game he was winning in a rook end game, rook and 3 versus rook and 1. You ended up holding that, but did you gain confidence with the fact that you were holding positions that looked like he was on the verge of victory and then winning positions where you had, advantages?
Yeah, once I got a 2-game margin, I started feeling really confident. Holding that draw in the first game. I mean, actually, if you guys recall my match with Lawrence Trent, it went almost exactly the same way in the first game. I was just getting ground down. I was worse as white. I was behind on the clock, and I had to defend a rook ending. This time I had 2 fewer pawns, but still managed to hold. But yeah, I mean, I think I got a little fortunate in some of the time scrambles. The third game was nice. I really liked that game, the same color bishop ending.
Yep.
The game where I had, I think, 5 versus 4 and knight versus bishop, I was up a pawn just grinding away. I had 0.3 seconds on my clock. I looked down and I almost flagged, and I saw Greg offer to draw. I might have flagged if he hadn't offered to draw.
Oh, you were down on
a
time.
bit surprised.
Yeah, I was
my brain was jumbled at that point. I was just like, help.
Yeah, I completely lost track of time in that game.
Yeah.
And well, did you feel like that was a real bailout for you? Because at that point, the match was still close, and the trajectory of the game was clearly going in Greg's favor with the bishop against the knight that was stuck in the corner. So do you feel like you could breathe a sigh of relief, and even if things really weren't going your way, as that one was going downhill quickly, you still had what it took to kind of withstand that pressure?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you get even a half point there, when just a moment prior it looked like you were going down for sure, that definitely helps. And yeah, after the 5+1 portion, I mean, I already had a pretty big lead. I was feeling very, very confident.
Well, Greg, if you started this match over, what would you do differently?
Let's see. I would win the first game. I would win the second game.
More Scandi.
I would maybe figure out some better lining, some more exciting lining in Satori. I kind of thought this line was okay, but not my style exactly. The way
It was more John's style. Boring positions.
Yeah, I should have had I should have had more than one lining in Satori. I should have had 3 or 4. I had a lot of stuff prepared against regular D4 stuff, but I was ready for the Grunfeld. As you saw in the first game.
Yeah, I got a bad feeling about that after the first game. So, because when you pause, even in a 5+1 game for 20 seconds, let's say in the opening, to figure out what line you're going to play, that adds up so quick. Mm-hmm. So I just thought avoid that altogether. And then I started having good results, so I didn't see any reason to switch from the Tory.
Makes sense. Well, thank you both for what was a very entertaining match. Even though it didn't live up to the promise of a Scandinavian battle, I feel like, we were excited to see it in the final game, but we are a little disappointed, if we're honest with you both. So, John,
hey, material, Robert, you got to keep it under wraps. There's still another match to be played. Job's not over yet.
Indeed. And we're all looking forward to it. Congratulations, John. Good match, Greg.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure playing in this tournament.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Greg.
We'll see you in the final, John, and thanks to you both. And with that, we bring up the bracket here to remind everybody of, who is John facing? He is facing Alina Kashinskaya. As he said, when she beat Krzysztof Zielecki in the first match, he was like, hey, let's notice Alina. She's obviously a super strong classical player, but maybe a little shaky in the Blitz portion, but then she beats Eric Rosen largely because of the bullet section, goes on to crush Teddy Coleman in the semis. And I mean, Danya, John, Alina in the final. You're making a pre-match prediction right now. You're going to think more about it, I know, but right now, who you got?
I mean, I was very impressed with John's performance today, and I was so impressed. Alina's match against Teddy is something that I will not forget for a long time. And Alina just came out firing game after game, finding incredible tactical resource. It is going to be a case of unstoppable force against a movable object, and I predict a very close match. I know I say that every time. I really think it's going to be a very close match. I cannot wait for that final. Both of these are players at the top of their game, and we're just going to have to see. I'm going to refrain from a prediction for the first time because I really have no idea. It could go either way, and there might be overtime.
I think that match will be very close because both players sort of had a similar path towards this final, and they dominated their respective semifinal matchups that came as a surprise to me, at least. And with Alina Kashinskaya taking on John Bartholomew, I don't know. Just like you, it sounds like a cop-out, but I'm really unsure who should be the favorite there because they both ultimately won by big margins. As John himself said, Alina has only been getting better. She had a tough first-round match, and since then she's been improving, and John's been dominant throughout the entire competition.
Indeed. I think everybody is so looking forward to this match. I certainly am. And today's match was another very, very entertaining match. Not as close as we predicted, but I had a great time. And Robert, I will say, on balance, you were a net positive in terms of enriching my experience.
Well, I'm glad if you want to go for plus minus in the box score that I at least ended with a plus there. But, it's been a fun time for sure. And John Bartholomew and Alina Kashinskaya will face each other in the finals. That will be scheduled sometime this week. Of course, the match just finished, so John will have to talk about his schedule and see if it matches up with Alina's. But we will have that finale coming to you soon. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your night. If you're somewhere where it's already early in the morning, the wee hours, get up, get ready for a good Sunday. But thank you so much to everybody who's tuned in for this I Am Not GM Speed Chess Championship brought to you by Chess.com, because without your support, we couldn't make it happen. I know that Donnie and I both are gaining energy from it, and
Indeed, we
tune
are.
in for other events like the European Online Chess Championship.
It'll tide you over, more than tide you over before the finals. So don't forget about those other events. We thank each and every one of you for tuning in. We had a great community here, a great chat. And it certainly makes our experience a lot more entertaining.
And I guess I would be making a mistake not to mention one more thing, that there is a matchup with Danny Wrench and Anish Giri. So another one of the adopted Danny events will be very short. I think it's on Monday, if I'm not mistaken. But the point is it raises money for a adoption foundation, Dave Thomas organization. So tune into that, see Danny likely get adopted. But until then, enjoy yourselves, everybody. Stay safe and
bye, everybody.
Be happy.